Political Ranger. Oh my gosh, I don't understand what's going on with this. Oh, if I do this, that's me, okay?
What's good?
What's up, bro?
Not much.
So
What's going on with you?
about?
Well, I mean, I saw some of your content. I don't know. I don't think you know anything about me. I don't know. I'm a streamer, and I talk about economics a bit. I guess I don't know what I stumbled across first, but like I've seen you have videos like promoting Milton Friedman and like capitalism and that stuff. I agree with. Like I'm a capitalist and such. But then you seem to have these. Like, for example, a weird position on tariffs that I think is like very much against what Milton Friedman would want, and I think very much against what you should want as a capitalist. So I am curious about how you're squaring that circle.
Well, I like Milton Friedman. I've read a good chunk of Milton Friedman. I've read his Free to Choose. That was a good book. And also, I'm getting a little bit into capitalism and freedom, but I disagree on his point of like tariffs. And I disagree on like some of his stuff, like on immigration. But I do like his arguments for capitalism. Like the pencil argument was a good argument, and so I do like capitalism. I just believe in like economic nationalism more than free trade and like supporting immigration coming in for stuff like that. So
But I guess
disagree
like
with him also.
I think the same principles that get you to understanding the point about I pencil and stuff will probably get you to support some version of like free trade and free immigration. Like why should a central planner have some amount of control over where you buy goods from, where companies buy goods from, as opposed to the market being deciding that, the market deciding how labor and capital are allocated across borders?
Well, because I believe in first of all, I believe in putting my citizens first. If I'm the president or if I'm in government, you have an obligation to put your citizens first. So I believe in if you're taking immigration, if you're taking in, or if you're free trade, businesses go across seas, and that puts your worker out of business, which means you're not putting your country first. I I want Americans to be employed. I want Americans to be put first in their citizenship, because that's what the government's job is, to put their citizens first. And I just think like mass immigration and free trade will go against that, in my belief of trying to put America first.
Sure. So I think for reasons that Milton Friedman would very much argue for, and I'm sure I haven't read those books of his, so I don't know if they're explicitly mentioned in those books, but like would lead you to believe that a lot of these things are good for Americans. So for example, there might be some cost to someone when you open up trade, right? There might be some factories offshore. I actually think that in the US that like it's not like a huge deal. I think a lot of the quote unquote decline in manufacturing in like small towns, a lot of it just has to do with productivity increases as opposed to trade. But to the you could have some effect of trade there. But I think you should think that the net effect of that is positive, because there's a sort of diffuse gain to consumers. Every consumer across the US is going to have some savings because they can get cheaper goods. Or if it's a intermediate good, every company in the US is going to have access to these like cheaper capital inputs, and that lets them pass on some of that savings to the consumer. And there are other the net effect of that ends up being like an increase in productivity, right? You just do get more output per unit of input under a free trade system as opposed to a non-free trading system, and that tends to increase people's quality of life. It tends to have an upward pressure on wages, all that good stuff.
Okay, so let me just steal man your point. So you're saying that with free trade, right, wages can go up because productivity goes up due to what's it called? Like when you get offshoring your factories, foreign countries, their productivity goes up. So how does that raise our wages? I might be
so because like the average wage rate is going to be like roughly proportional to average productivity, right? There are obviously nothing's going to really be like perfect with that or anything, but that's what the theory would suggest. It seems like empirically it is the case that a country's average productivity is correlated with average wages, and it seems like free trade generally, and just a more liberal trade system generally tends to increase countries' average productivity because there are gains from specialization, there are gains from economies of scale, and there's also just gains from like information being exchanged when trading as well, like exporters for nuanced reasons like will actually get like more effective or more productive when they export products. We have like evidence of this from like Egyptian rug manufacturers, but I don't know. I think those are probably the smaller effects as opposed to just the gains from scale and comparative advantage.
Well, here's the thing about productivity. Productivity has gone up in the last like 50 years or so,
Hmm.
but the wages have not kept up with the productivity rates increasing. And so it can be both of like obviously immigration, in my opinion, is definitely a factor in that. But also if you look at losing businesses also hurts Americans in just like employment wise and losing entire towns and stuff like that. But I just don't see under the free trade thing, right? Ever since like Reagan, when we started seeing massive free trade expansions, I don't see the wages have been going up at levels that meet productivity rates.
Right. So I think that it's not the case that wages, like average wages, haven't kept up with average productivity. Average productivity. I know roughly the charts you're kind of referring to there and such. And I think among other things, the biggest mistake they generally make is they're comparing the productivity of everyone of the whole economy to wages of a subset of workers. So that's not actually showing you that average wages aren't keeping up with average productivity. It's showing you that potentially there's just wage inequality. Some workers are a lot more productive than others, and that means that there's a discrepancy between average productivity and the wages of a subset of workers who might not individually have seen a big increase in productivity, right? So I think once you do account for those things, among other things, you do see that average wages have tracked average productivity fairly well. And I think there's just like, you should also just understand, like kind of mechanically, free trade is generally going to give you increased real wages insofar as it lets consumers and companies have access to cheaper goods, right? Like that mechanically kind of increases your real wage.
How? My question is here's the thing: when you let businesses off, like going across China or Vietnam or other countries, how does that raise Americans' wages? Because if they're losing employment, their wages aren't going up.
Right. So there's that. There can be that effect, right? But for one, presumably the reason that they are offshoring or whatever is because it's cheaper, and there are potential like gains to consumers there. So just like I said, mechanically, people's real wage goes up. Like the amount of basket of goods they can buy is going to go up if they now have access to cheaper products. And then two, there's some, sort of reallocation, right? That like those resources, that labor that was previously being employed in the U.S. to do whatever that's now offshored now goes to other things that the U.S. is more productive in, that we have some type of a competitive advantage in, or maybe that we specialize in because of like economies of scale. So, I mean, you could just like, think about it like a basic competitive advantage model. There's probably some kind of intuitions you have about like, it is probably better for you to like not know how to do everything yourself, to not grow your own food, because it's just worth your time to specialize in what you are better at and have someone else specialize in growing the food, because that actually makes you both better off overall, right? Like,
Well, here's the thing: before we lost this massive amount of industry, we were able to produce everything ourselves and at a really high rate. Not everything, obviously. There's a lot of things that we had to import, but in terms of like manufacturing goods, we were
mhm.
really good at that. And but businesses decided to go get it cheaper. It puts I don't know how many Americans have lost their jobs, but it's over millions of Americans have lost their jobs. And I don't think that's worth the consumer going to be able to get something cheaper. I don't think that's. I think it's worth having the American employment and having more people employed that are Americans, and the United States being able to export stuff. That's, to me, is more beneficial to our country and more beneficial to the American
what
citizens and American workers who you're supposed to put first, more than
Well,
just like
exports have exports have gone up as well. Like generally, there are it's more complicated than this because there's also trade in financial assets. But like, you know, generally imports are like exports are like going to be the way you pay for imports. Like you have to export stuff to like get foreign currency in order to buy imports. So like generally, trade liberalization leads to both increased imports and increased exports. But, you know, I think like when you talk about employment, and I should also mention, I think like you say, like manufacturing's been hollowed out or whatever, we lost all these jobs or whatever. I think the story is more complicated that not only have we seen like increased exports overall, but like if we just look at manufacturing output, that was going up until 2008. You know, and we haven't like signed any free trade deals past 2008, really. Like it was going up during this entire period where we were signing all these free trade deals and supposedly like offshoring all the things. I think that's suggestive of us just getting like more productive in manufacturing. But like these things, American wages, American employment, these are things that I think on net are typically helped by free trade. So I mentioned like increased exports before, like maybe there's some job loss due to import competition, but it's also probably job gains due to like increased exports. There's some amount of empirical evidence for that. There's some amount of like just reallocation that happens because consumers can save money on the goods that are now being imported and they spend more elsewhere, or they save more and that invests in like the capital stock, and that can have positive effects in productivity and in jobs as well. Like these are offsetting mechanisms that I think outweigh the gains to or any of the losses from import competition. And I'd be curious, like why do you have the opposite presumption, right? Or what evidence do you have that suggests the opposite is true? Because I think most of the empirical evidence supports my view.
Well, ever since Bill Clinton, we've been on a manufacturing decline. I think that's just a fact. Ever since the U.S. and China
In terms of what?
in 2000, huh?
In terms of what?
Like employment, and I think output too has been. It's just.
But manufacturing employment peaked in 1954, right? It's been falling since 1954, and it's well before Clinton.
Well, not necessarily. It had ups. Like for example.
No, I know it.
1979 under Jimmy Carter, it had an explosion.
So I know it peaked overall in 1954. I believe it's been on, in my understanding, a fairly steady downward trend since then. It's possible, obviously, you know, everything is going to have some periods of like expansion and or contraction. So like I'm not saying it's been on a, you know, consistent 2% a year decline forever and ever and ever, but like it's been a broad trend not only in the U.S. but in like almost every developed country actually has this trend of manufacturing following an inverted U-shaped path where it increases at first as a lot of agricultural workers are being reallocated towards the manufacturing and service sector. And then it peaks and starts declining as countries develop more. And a lot of reallocation happens between primarily the manufacturing sector to the services sector.
Well, if something peaks, right, and it comes down for the next 20 years, it doesn't mean that's like necessarily declining. It's just declining from the peak. It wasn't like a problem in the 1960s and 70s, and maybe even a lot of parts in the 80s, where it was like a manufacturing business exodus to other countries. It wasn't like a mass exodus where we're seeing with like right now, where businesses are going offshore. And, you know, again, robbing Americans unemployment. But that's besides the point. I don't think it was a real problem until NAFTA and until Bill Clinton came in and started doing a lot of these free trade agreements.
Okay, so I think the fact that the trend goes back further, it's one suggestive of like a broader underlying mechanism. I think that mechanism is essentially has to do with the income elasticity of the different sectors, and how that affects consumer spending as a country gets a higher GDP per capita, essentially. But regardless of that, so I think it's suggestive of some like underlying broader trend there that might be like hard and non-advantageous to attempt to reverse. And I think we can get into this as well. But I think tariffs are not even a particularly great way to reverse the decline in manufacturing. But we also didn't like see the actual trend decrease that much. And at the same time, we saw increasing manufacturing output, right? So I know if you just draw like a trend line, like if you fit
I'm sorry, we didn't see that under Bill Clinton. Like we did see like short, but ever since in the 2000s, it's been on a decline. And then really,
but it's been on a decline since 1954, right? So I think so if you draw it, if you fit a trend line, what I'm about to say is going to epically disprove that. So if you fit a trend line to the manufacturing share of employment from like 1960 to 1980 and just extend the trend line outwards, you just project it outwards at the same trend, you can predict almost exactly what the manufacturing share of employment was in 2010. Right, like it's within margin of error, it's very accurate. So I think that's suggestive of the fact that it's been on a fairly steady downward trend, as opposed to there being like some major massive increase post 2002 or whenever China ascended to the WTO. I think it was 2002.
Well, almost all of our big companies. Here's the thing: almost all of our big companies are are making stuff in other countries now. Like, for example, like I think Apple. I can't name business off the top of my head, but Toyota just came back. They were in Mexico for a while. So like, a lot of these businesses did leave. So I don't necessarily agree with that, because in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, most of our bigger businesses were here making stuff here, and that was employing Americans compared to now they're employing other citizens.
I again agree there's been a decline. I just think that the decline has been like fairly steady and such. And I think
I'm not agreeing to you on that. I'm not agreeing with it. I just don't.
You don't agree there's been a you don't agree there's been a decline, or you don't?
1954 to 1980, all of our bigger businesses were not making stuff in other countries.
Well, so just because the trend is downward doesn't mean, obviously, if you go back far enough, people are like, there's going to be manufacturing here still, right? I'm just saying the trend, the fact that the trend is fairly steady is evidence of like trade not being like the biggest necessarily the biggest deal in causing that downward trend.
What is steady? Like, what is steady losses to you? Like, what is steady losses?
As in, so what I said before, as in, if you just like fit a trend line from 1960 to 1980 and project it to 2010, you can predict almost exactly the manufacturing share of employment in 2010. The fact that you didn't see the trend diverge from past the 1980s.
So let me just steel man your point real quick. So you're saying that from 1954 to 1980, it's like in a way the same steady decline compared to 2000 to now.
Yeah.
Is that good, Steelman?
What?
Yeah.
I'm saying that the decline in manufacturing as a share of employment has been fairly steady in the U.S. as opposed to like jumping suddenly after we signed free trade deals like NAFTA and the WTO.
Well, that's not how it works. That's not how it works. It doesn't like all of a sudden like business just like all of a sudden like it just spikes down. It's not how it works. Because you have to like it takes a while to build factories in other countries and stuff like that.
Yeah, so but you would probably expect the trend to.
It's gonna be a decline, but it's gonna take a while for it to decline. Because
sure, but you would probably expect the trend to increase after the period of all the free trade agreements we were signing.
When did manufacturing increase in the last 20 years or 26?
When did so under Biden there was some increase in the amount of manufacturing jobs. I think as a share of employment,
the Chips and Science Act, which did put tariffs on goods, not like what's it called? Not a blanket tariff.
There's not a blanket tariff, yeah.
So that brought back manufacturing. It was targeted tariffs.
Well, I think that so we get into that. I think there are ways to do tariffs and subsidies that I think can increase manufacturing employment. I think if Trump kept the maximalist tariffs up for long enough, it might have some positive effect on manufacturing employment. I think as it stands now, it's likely that the net effect of manufacturing has been negative because there's a lot of tariffs on intermediate goods that manufacturers rely on, and because of all the uncertainty around them. So we have evidence from, for example, Trump's first term, the steel tariff he imposed, although that did protect some amount of steel jobs, it seems like it actually ended up costing the manufacturing sector on net because a lot of manufacturers rely on imported steel to make their goods. So the net effect ended up being about like negative 74,000 jobs, even within the manufacturing sector. So I think the tariffs on intermediate goods don't help them. And then I think the tariffs on or the uncertainty around the tariff announcements and the walking them back a ton, that is also not good for manufacturers. That is also not good for investment more generally.
I can agree with you. Trump does not implement the tariffs in the best way, but with the steel tariffs, I was doing a little bit of research on that. There was some job growth in that, and there was job growth in that industry.
Right, but there was job growth in steel.
The industry they was tariffing was growing.
Yeah, but it's downstream. Also, but I'm saying the net effect was negative even within the manufacturing sector, right?
You're saying like the manufacturing as a whole, right?
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the sector that he tariffed was going up.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
sector that he tariffed that was going up. So that means there was growth. It's just that manufacturing as a
Well,
whole.
well, what do you mean by growth? In the industry that he protected, there was an increase in domestic employment. I'm not
That's what I mean
disputing
by
that.
growth.
I'm not
That's what I mean
disputing
by
that tariffs can increase domestic employment in the industries that they're protecting, right? What I think is that one, oftentimes, if it's placed on intermediate goods, the net effect on manufacturing can be negative, and then two, I think that it's not like welfare enhancing. I think it's worse for the country when we do that because you're hurting consumers, because you're not allowing for comparative advantage or economies of scale, and because just more generally there are costs to. There are like market entry costs and like information costs that's a little more nuanced that you stop by not having a free trade system.
I'm against like big blanket tariffs. I like a small blanket tariff because it raises revenue for the government, but like nothing like ginormous, like a 5%, like 1 to 5% just to get revenue in. But like talking about like what I mean by growth, like even like I don't want us to make for example like underwear. We don't need to make that here. But I'm talking about like stuff like semiconductor, steel, cars, stuff we need to make here. That's where we need the tariff because we need growth in that. We need to make that stuff here just in case like another country collapses.
But that seems like primarily a national like security reason, and I think there can be some justification for some type of protectionism there. You know, no one wants.
Millen Freeman agreed to that.
Yeah, but it seems like it seems like earlier you had a much more general concern about free trade, about like jobs and about
I don't think we really need to tariff stuff like underwear. Like that's not, you don't have to make that here. But I'm talking about like
okay, wait, but so why don't you want to make that here?
Why? Because it's not worth like what's it called? It's not worth like the market shock and then also raising prices for underwear and stuff like that.
Do you think
it's not worth?
Okay.
It's not worth. It's not worth raising the prices for stuff for employment to make clothes here. But like stuff like stuff like cars and
do you think
steel
that
and stuff like that,
U.S.
I think that's more important.
Do you think that U.S. employment overall would go up if we did make a bunch of underwear here?
I don't know how many like people specialize in making underwear, but if we tariff clothes, probably will go up. But I don't think it'll be worth it because what's it called? The price increase for clothes. It's not that big. It's not that big of a deal compared to steel or industry. I'm trying to think of like examples like semiconductors.
So I think there's one harm you've correctly identified there, which is like, you know, prices and such. So that can and I think you're correctly identifying like there's sort of a concentrated benefit and there's like a diffuse benefit. Well, I guess it would be the opposite here. There's a diffuse benefit to people who have gained the jobs, and then like concentrated sorry, I said it wrong. Concentrated gain to those who get the jobs, diffuse cost to those who have to pay a bunch more for the extra for the clothes, right? And I think you're identifying correctly. Like the net effect there can be negative. Now, I think the net effect there is likely negative for tariffs on a whole host of other things. And then I think you also you're leaving out the fact that there's an opportunity cost to America producing clothes, right? So the fact that our resources, which could otherwise be going to software development, which could otherwise be going to making fucking rockets and banking and insurance and a bunch of the cool stuff we do and export around the world, it's instead going to making clothes when we could be importing that for cheaper while our own domestic resources are being used to do something else.
Although, I'm sorry to interrupt, if it's like I do believe in like some terms of morality on tariffs, like if they're using like there's instances where they use like slave labor and stuff like that and stuff like that. I do believe even if it's like clothes or something like that, they're using like slave labor, I do believe in tariffs because I believe that's unequal or immoral in a way. So it would be like in a way like a sin tax for that, because I don't think businesses should go and, you know, it's immoral to go make a child in like China or Vietnam and they're forced to do this labor and go get that for cheaper. It's not worth it. I just think that's immoral. But not all, I know not all imported goods do that, but like some of them do, and like Tesla's been like, you know, known for doing this. So I do believe in like, even if it's like not a big industry, I do believe in that tariff. But most of the time they're not making clothes that are like using cheap forced labor. But if they are, I would believe in that tariff too, because I do believe in like that term of morality. But I have a
Mhm.
question for you. Do you believe that's important for America to make certain industry, like certain sectors of industry here?
So I think there's a argument for some stuff on national security grounds. I think, you know, every you said or I said, even Milton Friedman would concede that much. I think that oftentimes tariffs are not actually the ideal type of like industrial policy there. Tariffs are at best equivalent to a subsidy plus a tax on consumers. So like, I don't know, just like do the subsidy and then like get the revenue elsewhere in a more efficient tax. I think that's probably ideal. And I think there's like a bunch of concerns that we have with tariffs with, for example, rent seeking that a bunch of companies can do. And we even have evidence of this from Trump's first term and probably more regarding his second term, and evidence of it having like negative productivity effects. So we can even see like, you can even find examples like domestically, because transportation costs falling is equivalent to like the going to a free trade regime, and we can try to measure the effects of like what happens to industries when they face like lower transportation costs. And we have evidence of this even domestically in the U.S. when transportation costs fall, like previously mining monopolies that were like mining a bunch of resources, like they actually get more productive when transportation costs fall and they face more competition because they now have to actually compete for that type of stuff. And we have similar evidence with regard to like Chile and some of the liberalization that Chile did when like their copper mines face import competition from once Chile liberalized trade, their copper mines got more productive. So there's a concern that even Milton Friedman raised as well, that like when you protect domestic industries, you don't actually end up like increasing their productivity or viability at all. You just kind of end up making consumers worse off and having just like a very shitty industry domestically.
Well, I don't agree with that because one, again, the Chips and Science Act, which put tariffs on chips, we did experience a manufacturing growth in 2024. So and also like I just can't find.
But that also had like
where,
a bunch of subsidies and stuff, right?
yeah, that too.
Yeah.
But
So I think and like I said, I agree that there are plenty like cases where you could have tariffs protect a certain amount of domestic jobs. I think that there are a lot of cases where that can happen. I just think the net effect on even manufacturing jobs overall is often negative, and just the total like economic welfare is effect is often negative.
So then why didn't that happen when we had when we had high tariffs in our country, where we created the best industry in the world at that time? And also again, Biden, when he had targeted tariffs and we didn't see a decline, we actually saw a boom.
A decline in what?
Like a manufacturing employment. We actually saw a boom in manufacturing employment and like record investment back into American industry.
I mean, I think that mostly had to do. I think that almost. I don't want to say maybe not almost entirely, but mostly had to do with the subsidies and the Chips and Science Act and the IRA, as opposed to just the tariffs he did. Now, and I think some of the tariffs Biden did, if not most of them, were bad. But so I think that, like in the past, it's not even clear to me that we like saw positive effects from the tariffs just because that we had high tariffs in the past and developed manufacturing. Doesn't mean that the tariffs were responsible for developing the manufacturing, or that we wouldn't have been better off without the tariffs. So I think the welfare effect of the tariffs back then was likely negative as well. It's just that a lot of states back then relied on tariffs because we had low state capacity. It was just harder to administer other taxes, and because it was income tax wasn't even constitutional during that time period, so the federal government relied on it for that reason. If you actually look at there are a few studies that we have that try to look at the effect of the tariffs on manufacturing, and it doesn't actually seem like they help manufacturing. So there isn't actually there's a study from Douglas Irwin that looks at the effects of the Gilded Age tariffs on the labor productivity in the industries that they protected. And if there was to be like a benefit to manufacturing, you would expect it to be like in the labor productivity. That's one of the primary channels that you'd hope that it would go through. But we don't actually see a positive effect on the labor productivity of the industries that I was attempting to protect.
Well, I disagree there because, like, I can even go to another instance with, well, first of all, Americans, even like after in the 1910s and 20s when we had high tariffs, we also had like our workers were the most paid and the highest productivity with the highest paid workers at that time. And if we look at like South Korea in the 1960s, 1980s, they experienced building their whole manufacturing based on high tariffs because they knew they were going to get the U.S. coming in and stuff like that, hurting South Korean business. But they put tariffs on other goods, and they completely built their industry, and it protected their workers. That's another instance where tariffs have shown to bring manufacturing. But also, I just disagree with the point of like, well, we didn't have an income tax, that's why we had tariffs. Even when we had income tax, we still had high tariffs really until like maybe like the 60s.
Well, I'm just giving you, I think, the other reasons we had tariffs then, and I think that's, part of the reason we had them. I don't think that just because we had them back then makes them good. I think there were a lot of reasons outside of even protecting manufacturing that we relied on them. But I think the average effective tariff rate went down.
Even after the 1920s and 30s, not 30s back then, but 20s and 1920s.
I'm pretty sure it was down since the 1860s. In the 1920s, it was probably still higher than today, but I don't know. I don't know exactly what it was off the top of my head. It looks like this is. I don't really want to rely on Statista or whatever. They have meme stuff sometimes, but it was like in the 20s and 30s. It was like obviously in the 30s. I guess we had Smoot-Halley. But it still was like.
But 30s had low tariffs because Great Depression and stuff like that. So.
Well, yeah, that's why that's
moved. Yeah. I think the 40s and 50s we had tariffs too.
Well, they were so the average effective rate back then was still below the 30% plus rate that we had in the 1880s, 1860s. It looks like it was about like 12, 13% or something in the 40s. In the 30s, it got up to about 20% before coming down after they because we had, like I said, Smoot-Halley back then. But I think like I said, there's clearly
what sectors. I think some sectors had over 20%. I might be wrong though.
Well, I'm sure this is just the average effective tariff rate, right? So it's going to be going to take into.
Yeah, but certain sectors just have higher tariffs. That's just the thing. Because you need to protect
but the average effective rate is good. It's going to weight how much the tariff is on individual goods and sectors, and how much of that good or sector we import, right?
I don't like that number for the reason I just stated, because I like, even if you say, well, they only had like a 12% tariff averagely, like sure, maybe the 80s tariff.
But I think I think as you disaggregate it, the picture kind of only gets worse for you, because I think I mentioned that Douglas Irwin study that we have that tries to isolate the effects of the tariffs on the industry that they were attempting to protect, and it doesn't seem like it had any positive effect. It seems like there's no effect on.
Not any positive effects. I just don't agree to that, because the tariffs are the reason why the British didn't come here and just take all of our work, build all their factories here, and pretty much make us a colony again. Just we had no national security.
Yeah, so I think for some of the reasons I mentioned earlier, you might not expect tariffs to always have a positive effect on manufacturing, on that and manufacturing productivity. For one, you are a tax on imports. It, again, financial assets kind of messes up a bit, but will also negatively affect exports if you don't let consumers.
That didn't happen in the not the Gilded Age, or when we had really high tariffs. If anything, we had more trade deals and we had more exports in that time.
Compared to what counterfactual?
Maybe counterfactual, like compared to what?
Compared to are you saying? I'm saying, if your argument is we didn't, we still had exports during that time or whatever. I'm saying I don't think that goes against my argument, which is that you still, compared to the counterfactual, we probably had less exports because of the tariffs, as opposed to not having them. And that's all that's required for me saying one mechanism by which tariffs could hurt manufacturing is by reducing exports. And many exports are like
Yeah, but I'm
manufacturing
saying
exports.
I'm countering the study that you labeled to me. I'm disagreeing with the study because I don't see how that hurt it. What that I don't see how the tariffs actually hurt the
Well,
manufacturing or the
I'm
industry.
trying to give you a mechanism, right, or some mechanisms. One mechanism is that it's called learner symmetry. A tax on imports will, given certain assumptions, also act as a equivalent tax on exports because it affects the relative profitability of industries in the same way, and because of exchange rate effects. So just to make it keep it simple here, if you're not letting consumers, or if you're taxing consumers when they are trying to buy goods from other countries can't really get US dollars. And without those US dollars, they're not going to be able to buy US exports. So if they don't have US dollars to buy US exports, they're not going to be able to buy the output from a bunch of United States manufacturing firms. That's one mechanism by which it could have harmed manufacturing employment. I think another one is by taxing the capital stock, by taxing intermediate goods that manufacturing companies, even back then, might have wanted to import. And that's going to reduce the amount of investment that they're able to do. That's going to reduce the total capital stock in the country. And there's probably some effect as well on the size of the market that they're able to sell to. Because if you, relative to a free trade regime, where at least the other country has some reduced barriers to their market as well, you're going to limit the size in a market that manufacturing firms can sell to if you don't, if they're not able to sell to certain countries that they would be able to sell to under a free trade regime.
Yeah, what I would say to that is that I'm not saying tariffs can always work. There's some instances where tariffs can hurt the country, just like anything, like tax cuts can hurt the country sometimes. It's not always perfect. Like no mechanism is perfect, but it can still work. And I gave an example of the Gilded Age in South Korea, and even like the steel industry
Well,
under
I'm
Donald
just
Trump's
trying
first
to,
term.
okay. So you like I cited, you gave the example of the tariffs back then. I'm saying, I think the best evidence we have I'm saying, I think there are other reasons that we relied on tariffs at that time. And the tariffs might not, were even back then, not welfare enhancing. And I think they might have failed to even protect manufacturing in a sense that you're thinking of. And you asked how, and I cited the one study, I think Douglas Irwin 2000, which finds that it didn't actually increase labor productivity in the industries that they were protecting. And you asked, how could that possibly be the case? And I think I just described to you three mechanisms: by taxing exports, by taxing capital goods, and by reducing the size in a market that firms can sell to. Do you understand how those three possible mechanisms could possibly have a negative effect on manufacturing?
I don't think that happened because, for example,
Wait. So not. I'm just. Do you understand how those are mechanisms by which there could be a
it
negative
could play a
effect?
part. No, it definitely could play a part, but I just don't think that happened in the Gilded Age or even under like Trump in the steel tariff.
Okay.
I don't think that happened.
So I think that we do have some evidence that the steel tariffs caused exchange rate appreciation during Trump's first term. I think given the uncertainty and negative growth effects that Trump's second term tariffs have had, they actually probably have not affected or not ever appreciated exchange rates in the same way. But regardless, so if you understand, so I'm saying those are three mechanisms. It seems like you understand they could have maybe played a part in, or they could theoretically negatively affect manufacturing. You just don't think they did. But I think the best available evidence suggests that they did have that negative effect. So I said at one study, Irwin 2000. There are two other studies. I can't remember the exact results that they were measuring off the top of my head, but I can find them for you. It doesn't seem like you have any evidence to the contrary, really.
Well, I don't know. I know there's a couple studies I know, but I don't remember the name of it. But there is one study. I don't remember these names of these studies, but there is some studies that show that they do in some instances do bring back in some form industry or protecting industry or rising employment.
Sure, but we're talking about a specific time period. We're talking about a specific set of tariffs here, and I think there's a few studies into this that side with me. Like I said, I already agreed that there are cases where tariffs can protect jobs in certain industries, I think that happens at the cost of jobs in other industries, right? It's the same thing. Like I would just view it as as the same way I view like technological increases, right? A lot of labor saving technology will like decrease jobs in one sector, but lead to more jobs in other sectors. So the net effect
Well, that's why I
of
believe. That's why I believe
technology.
about the tariffs. That's why I believe about the tariffs. But I don't know. I don't know what jobs you'd necessarily be losing with like tariffs on, like target tariffs. I don't know what like you would.
Okay, well let's think about steel. Do you understand how, in the case of steel, you might be protecting some steel jobs, but there are a lot of manufacturing companies that make products for steel in them, right?
Yeah.
So if you increase the cost of steel, do you think they're going to like make more products or make less products?
Depends. Depends how much the money they make. It
Okay.
depends how much they make. It depends if the cost they'll just raise the prices and they still make the same amount of profit.
What? So you would, okay. Assuming like the elasticity of demand is within, it's like within a reason of, reasonable assumptions. It's bounded by, to some bound to it. You would expect that generally if companies have to pay more for an input and they attempt to pass that cost on to consumers, that consumers would probably pay less, or that consumers would probably buy less, right? And that would decrease their total profits.
I don't think so. I still think if they need steel, right? It's like if the demand is still there, I don't think necessarily the demand would decrease in a way. If they still need their products, they'll still buy it.
Okay, why do you think? Okay, do you think taxes just like generally don't? And to be clear, the companies will still buy some amount of steel, right? It's just that when the cost of steel is increased, when the cost of an input is increasing, that just like does shift supply to the left, right? Like if you look up like things that shift the supply curve for something, like the cost of an input will be one of the things there.
Yeah, but an example I can give you is like the rising meat prices, the rising coffee prices. Like people still buy those even if it's crazy high. The demand's still there. It's just that
Right. So
the
there is,
cost
so
to make it is higher.
you're it's true there are different elasticities of demand, right? Some products are what we call like inelastic goods, where if the price rises, people still buy close to the same amount. There are not many goods where it's perfectly inelastic, where if the price rises, you buy like exactly the same amount. There's like maybe like some life-saving like healthcare interventions are close to that, but even that, people care about their children and how much money they can pass on to their children and stuff. But generally, even if demand is relatively inelastic, right? If you have a leftward supply shift and, demand is not perfectly inelastic, like you're going to reduce a company's like total revenue, right? Like
It just depends how the demand is for that quarter.
why wouldn't they raise prices already if they could raise prices and get a profit on it? Like,
Because that's what the market has, and that's how much. For example, if they just raise their prices, right, people will stop going to them. But if I'm trying to find a good answer to this, but I'm just not wording it the best way. Here's the thing. In certain sectors, right, people are gonna buy it no matter what, right? Like meat demand
feel
still
like
stays
I
the
just feel like I
same.
just explain that. Yeah.
I know, but I'm trying to word this better. I just can't. I know to say it's not wording the best way. So what I'm trying to say is that I think the reason why people raise their prices is just to keep up with the demand and how much the thing costs. Like I don't think necessarily that that will make them less money. And if the profit margin still stays 5-10%, even if they're raising prices, I don't think they'll be
Yeah, but the quantity would reduce, right?
how much to buy for like
How
for
much
in the short term?
consumers
In the
buy?
short term, yes.
If a firm wants to maintain the same profit margin, which some of them do, and they face a higher production cost, then they can raise prices to make up for the higher production cost and maintain that same margin, but consumers probably buy less of that product, right?
Well, in the short term, I would say yes, there'd be a manufacturing, like they'll output less, but over time, when people get adjusted to that price, they can still buy what they used to buy. So it would be like I think it would be short term. It would be like a output decrease, but in the long term, I think it'd still be like the same or even more.
Well, I'm just saying you understand how if you put a tariff on one good that's an intermediate good, like again, we're talking about steel, how that might protect jobs in the steel industry, but that's going to have negative downstream effects because a bunch of other companies now have to pay more for steel, which means that they in turn have less total profits. They face supply just shift less for them, and they probably employ less people, right?
It depends. It depends how many people were buying the steel.
Oh my God.
Again, like if we look at the Iran war, right? It raises prices for gas, but people
Mm-hmm.
are they're still making the same profit margins. So I think that they're making more profit now, but even with the higher prices.
Wait. I'm not talking about. I'm not talking about So oil companies will make more profits, right? But do you think other companies make more profits?
That maybe like shipping services will make less profit. We haven't seen mass layoffs with them.
So we haven't seen mass layoffs, but not
We haven't even seen layoffs from them. They're just raising their prices and making the same amount of profit.
Who is?
The shipping services.
Sure. So shipping companies might they probably the quantity necessarily is going to go down. They would have to raise prices elsewhere by a lot in order to try to maintain the same profit. I would kind of doubt that it's the case that they have maintained the same. They might have maintained the same margin, but probably total profits are down. Regardless.
I don't believe so. But...
if there's an adverse supply shock and the cost of oil increases, it's true. Like oil companies can see increased profits from that because the price of oil will go up a lot. And if your company isn't negatively affected by the shock itself, then you maintain the same or similar production, and you just see like higher profits, right? That's that can be the case with goods that are inelastic in demand, but most other companies are going to be negatively affected, right? Because a lot of other companies rely on oil as an input, so they have to pay more for oil in order to make plastic, or in order to transport their goods, or in order to make energy. So there are all these other firms that are negatively affected. So net effect there is like definitely negative. And similarly, if you think about steel, you might protect some jobs in the steel industry with steel tariffs, but probably, and by probably I mean according to the best economic theory we have, and according to the best empirical evidence we have, you cost jobs elsewhere downstream because a bunch of other companies rely on steel to make nails or to make forks, and we therefore employ less people who make nails and forks.
Well, here's the thing. I think they'll just raise their prices and eventually make the same amount of profit, and then they'll just go back to normal, which is higher prices. Like in the short term, yes, they'll not be able to get enough forks and stuff to make, or whatever the hell, and you'll have to make maybe some layoffs, but in the long term they'll eventually just adjust to the price.
Who are you saying is adjusting to the price?
Like if, for example, steel, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
forks and whatever, like the people that need to buy steel, right?
Mm-hmm.
It will still, like the demand will still be the same, and the demand for forks will still be the same. They'll just raise prices. People are gonna still buy forks and probably still buy it at the same level.
Okay, but so I don't think that's the case. It's not clear to me that the demand for forks is like relatively inelastic or anywhere close to perfectly inelastic. But I don't, even if you think people are quote unquote going to get used to the price and they're going to buy the same quantity of forks later on, you would still agree that by nature of the tariff being there, the good that they are buying, even if they're used to the price now, the cost of that is higher relative to what they could get if they imported the good instead, right?
The cost of the good will be higher, but I think it's worth it to have the steel be made here.
Okay, so if the cost of the good is higher relative to what they could get if they were importing it, I think that's all that's necessary for my argument, because you're still going to be having a negative effect on the downstream industries relative to the counterfactual of not having the tariff there.
Short term, that's what I'm saying.
No.
Short term.
Do you think in the long term, like I don't understand what you're missing. If the tariff is not raising the price of the good such that it's now it's cheaper to buy the good here as opposed to buy the good from overseas, then the tariff isn't really doing anything, right? So like insofar as the tariff is actually effective, it's actually binding, you are like necessarily increasing the price of the product here relative to the counterfactual of what you could import it for, and that is going to have a negative effect on the downstream industries at whatever intermediate good that you're talking about.
Because we went over in what way they're having downstream, like what's it called, downstream negative effects. But what I'm trying to say is that it's only short term, and eventually we go back to normal, which is a higher price. I don't think industries will really suffer that much.
I think you're just like not understanding my argument.
How?
Because it doesn't seem like you understand that insofar as the tariff increases the cost of a good relative to the counterfactual, that there are going to be firms that use that good as an input that are going to suffer because of that. And that applies even in the long term.
I'm agreeing that the suffering is just short term.
No, why would it just go away? The only reason
raise their prices and make the same amount of profit.
Right, but you agree. But hold on. You say they raise their prices and make that same amount of profit. So if a firm raises their prices because of a tariff and makes the same amount of profit, could they be making even more profit if they had that price but also had cheaper steel because they could get imported steel for cheaper than they pay now?
We mean like people won't go buy them?
So I mean, in the case, so let's say your world makes sense, and there's there's tariff, but in the long run, people just get like used to the price, and companies just increase the cost of their goods to account for the added tariff, but consumers still buy the same amount of the good that they were previously buying, so everyone just adjusts. In this world, the price of steel is still higher domestically than it is overseas, right?
Sure.
So companies could import steel for cheaper than they currently buy it for, right?
With the tariff,
what they're
right?
paying with the tariff in existence,
Well, that's the whole point. The point of the tariff is to make it more expensive for them to.
Exactly. So they could get steel cheaper absent the tariff, right?
Absent the tariff, yeah.
Okay, so if they could get steel for cheaper absent the tariff,
in foreign nations, if someone makes something in China, and with no tariffs, they'll be cheaper in China.
Okay, so if what? I don't know if you're. Right? I'm saying if a company, even in the case where people just get used to the price and a company raises prices, but people buy the same amount, even in that case, as long as steel is more expensive than steel would be absent the tariff, which is like necessarily kind of the case, then companies could be making even more profit in the counterfactual without the tariff, and therefore my argument still works.
Let me just steelman your point. So you're saying that businesses could just raise prices right now if they even without the tariff. That's what you're saying. No, I
don't know how you don't understand what I'm saying. So as I understand, hold on, let me steelman your point. Okay, so this is the world you're describing to me. Is a tariff may come into effect, but and that may, a tariff on steel might have some negative effect in the short term on downstream industries, but over time, people will just get used to the price, and firms will just raise their price to account for any losses because they have to now pay the tariff, and consumers will continue to buy the same amount of the good because they're now used to the price. That's what you're saying, basically, right?
Yes.
So let's say that's the case, right? I don't think that's the case. I think all our available theory and evidence contradict that being the case. But let's say that's the case, okay? I'm granting that. In that world, companies could be making more profit if the tariff didn't exist. If consumers are buying the same amount of the good and the price is like higher, if you got rid of the tariff, then companies would be making more profit. Like it'd just be a pure profit gain if you got rid of that if you got rid of the tariff. I mean, now really, if you got rid of the tariff, companies might reduce prices and see, depending, and in that case, you would see higher quantities and such, right? So I think you would probably see that. But like some of the cost savings would be passed through the consumers. But you're still hurting downstream industries with a higher price relative to the counterfactual, like necessarily.
Yeah, I think even then, I think the short term decrease is still worth it to produce steel here. Like I don't think business is making profit or just as much profit.
Okay, hold on. I just want to make sure you understand my argument. Okay, so I'm saying that if you tariff an intermediate good, oftentimes the net effect on manufacturing employment will be negative. Okay, Do you understand that that is the point I'm making?
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to say. I'm disagreeing.
You disagree, but you disagree with what part?
I'm disagreeing that are you saying it's a long-term decrease that even with tariffs?
Depending on what you're tariffing, yeah.
So steel, would it be long-term?
So yeah, probably overall manufacturing employment would be negative even in the long term if you tariff steel. Yes.
I'm disagreeing for the reason I just said. Like I don't see.
Okay,
it.
but I don't understand how you don't understand. If the tariff is making the good more expensive, okay, even if people get used to it, and even if firms increase their pricing, consumers demand the same amount of the good. Okay, even in that world, you are still hurting companies relative to the counterfactual of not having the tariff because they still have to pay more for steel compared to the counterfactual of not having the tariff, right? So they could be making...
They're making the same profit. Why does it matter?
Because if they could make more profit, right? If there were more returns, if there were a higher return to investment, they would probably invest more.
Wait, if they're making 5% net margins, then they raise their prices because steel goes up. But they're still making 5% net margins. What's the difference?
Because if it is the case that absent the tariff, they could be making a 7% margin, probably in the world where there's a 7% margin for steel, you see more investment into the steel industry because there's a higher return you can get there, right? If the return to a given investment is higher, probably people are more likely to invest in the industry that has a higher return, right?
So you think that because the steel is so expensive, the businesses will not invest? That's why that doesn't make sense. If they're still making the same amount of net profits, they're going to invest.
Oh my God. I think if you raise the cost of an input, that supply shift leftward, okay? Anyone could open an econ textbook and look at the supply curve and look at the things that shift the supply curve and see.
But they're making the same amount of net margins. They're not.
Oh my God. Even in that world, they're making less profit compared to the counterfactual.
Oh my gosh. Okay. If they, okay, here. I'm explaining again. Okay. 5% net margins is 5% net margins no matter how expensive the thing is. So they'll be able to make this.
Oh my God. Yes. Wait, I understand that. I understand that. But if they maintain their margins by raising their price, even if consumers don't adjust downwards, right? Even if consumers don't buy less of the good, even in that world, because they pay more for steel because of the tariff, absent the tariff existing, they would pay less for steel and thus have a higher net margin. Do you agree with that?
Because if they still make...
Do you agree with that, yes or no? That absent the tariff existing in that world, they would have a higher net margin?
I mean, it depends if they raise their prices. But if they're making $10
oh my God.
per fork, and they raise it to $20 because the steel is so expensive, they're still making $10 per fork, or whatever. Any other fork is not $20.
Wait, yes. So I think if that were to happen, right? I think what you would actually see is that consumers would buy less, right? The quantity would fall, and their total profits would also likely fall, right? But regardless of that, let's say that doesn't happen, right? If they are selling forks for $20 and they have to pay $10 for steel or whatever, like you said, they're paying $10 for steel because of the tariff, correct?
Yes.
So let's say you got rid of the tariff. Now they'd be making more profit, correct?
If they charge
oh my
$10
God.
per fork, I'm just trying to just understand what you're saying. So they're making $10 per. They charge $10, right, and they make $10 profit, but they could raise it to $20 with absent the tariff, right? They could be making more money.
Now I don't understand what you're saying. I'm saying if you are saying if a company is paying a tariff, almost necessarily absent the tariff, they would have lower cost of production.
So absent the tariff, they'll have lower costs, but even though they're making the same amount of profit, it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't matter. Because
why? So you're not compared to the counterfactual. I don't know if your brain is just broken. I'm saying compared to the counterfactual of not having the tariff, they would have an even higher profit.
I don't think I'm not understanding how.
What do you mean? If a company is oh my God,
it's 10% net margins, no matter how expensive the damn thing is.
Okay, bro. Yes, I understand. Yes, I'm granting you this absurd world where consumers every good is has perfectly inelastic demand. Okay, I'm granting you that. Yes, companies raise their price to maintain the same profit margin. Okay, now if they're maintaining the price, they have the same profit margin, but they're still paying the tariff, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So if the tariff were gone, their profit margin would be even higher, correct?
No.
What do you mean no?
Because if it's 10% net margin, right?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't, even if they raised prices because steel is so expensive, they're still making 10% net margin.
Yes,
So
yes, they're making, yes, I grant, okay, let's say they're making 10% net margin, okay? Now, if you got rid of the tariff, if they assume that they aren't adjusting at the quantity margin like that, like the demand perfectly inelastic, we're holding demand fixed here, okay? Because that's what you want to do. The only thing I'm doing is getting rid of the tariff. They're now paying less for steel, correct?
Okay, but they still have the prices if there was a tariff. So
What?
Are they? I don't think you're understanding my hypothetical here. I think we have a miscommunication. I don't think you're understanding.
I don't think you're. I think everyone should be able to recognize that you're the one not understanding things here, dog.
I don't think you're understanding my hypothetical here.
I'm saying you're saying. I understand. I think what you're saying. I've read through it like 100 times now, bro. You're saying people will just get used to the price and firms will raise their prices to maintain the same profit margin. But I'm saying even in that case, we're not comparing the world before the tariff to the world after the tariff here. The correct comparison is the world with the tariff, even after they've raised their prices, to the counterfactual of not having the tariff currently. So if they are now charging a higher price because they wanted to maintain the same profit margin after the tariff was put in place, if they got rid of the tariff now, and because in your world, people are just used to this price, presumably they're not going to lower the price. We're just holding demand fixed. In that world, their profit margin would go up. Their total profits would go up because they now have a lower cost of production, but the same price. That's just like trivial. If your cost of production falls and the price stays the same and we're holding the quantity fixed, your profit margin or your net profit goes up.
I don't think that's how profit works. That's not how profit works.
Brother. Wait, I want you to say this out loud. Okay. So price and quantity are fixed.
Just give me an analogy.
I don't know how to give you an analogy with this.
Okay, just give me an analogy how much a consumer would be paying in your hypothetical.
What? Okay.
Give me an analogy how much a consumer would be paying. And
okay, so you're saying, so this is the world, you said it, we start in a world where, let's just say, like the cost of steel for a company, and that's the only input or whatever, is $5, and they're currently charging $10 for a fork, okay? So then we put a tariff on steel. Now steel costs $10. And in order to maintain like the same profit, what did it say that they were making before?
They were making $5 in profit.
They were making $5 in profit. So because they want to make $5 in profit, they raised the price to $15, and throughout this entire thing, we just hold quantity fixed, okay? Because in the long run, people just get used to the price, and they'll continue to buying the same amount of forks, okay? So quantity is fixed. Now, the consumer is still paying $15, the company's paying $10 for steel, and they get $5 in profit. Now, it's true, they have the $5 in profit now. They had $5 in profit before the tariff, okay? But now, let's get rid of the tariff. Consumers are still paying $15. We're holding quantity fixed in this example. But the company now makes $10 in profit because the cost of steel is now back down to $5, but they still have the same price.
Uh-huh.
So the company is making more profit absent the tariff.
That's why I replayed that to you like 10 minutes ago.
I don't think you. No, wait. So wait, do you agree? Do you agree that the company there is making more profit?
They won't be employing Americans, and they'll be going offshore.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god! We're talking about a downstream industry here, right? So my point has been, if you raise the cost of an input, there are companies that rely on that input that are harmed by that, and I'm demonstrating that to you.
They could be if you take the tariff off.
Repeat that.
If you take the tariff off, then you're just screwing over those businesses. But most likely,
what business are? If you take the tariff off, you're screwing over the industry that you're protecting, right? And when you say screw,
Yeah.
but you're exposing them to foreign competition. But so you're exposing but that foreign competition, someone is buying that competition, right? In that case, that the people buying the competition is firms that rely on steel as an input to make whatever they make, like forks and nails.
Okay.
So those firms are helped, right? Correct?
Yeah.
So those firms, you would expect an increase in employment, right? Or at least an increase in like capital intensity
Yes.
and employment. Okay. So do you understand how it's possible, how it might be possible that a tariff might protect jobs in some industry, but have negative effects on employment in downstream industries?
Short term.
Okay. How it's a long-term different here?
Like I've said for like 20 times. I've said that like 20 times. It would be short.
Yeah, because you can't, you just like are somehow incapable of understanding that you should compare it to the correct counterfactual. So you're what I've heard you say is that you think the long term is different because people are just going to keep buying the same amount of stuff.
Yeah, if they need to, yeah.
Okay, but even in that world, right? We could get rid of the tariff, and then companies' cost of production would fall, and if we're holding quantity and price fixed, their profit is going to increase.
Well, no, because the whole point of the tariff is to have Americans make the products.
Jesus fucking Christ. We're talking about a downstream industry.
I get it, but you're saying that like, oh, because of profits, right?
Getting rid of the tariff might cost jobs in the steel industry, but we're talking about jobs in the fork and nail industry right now.
Uh-huh.
So,
okay.
Yes or no, the fork and nail industry would be better off, even in the long run, absent the tariff on steel, right?
The business will be, not the workers.
Okay, so
the whole point of the tariff is to employ Americans.
Mm-hmm. And do we think that's going to be more or less employment in industries when the cost of production falls if we're holding quantity?
If they're making the same amount of profit, as they did before, then the employment will stay the same. Actually, it'll go up.
Wait, we're comparing. What do you? I don't know what you're comparing. Before what? I don't know what you mean. We're comparing with the tariff and absent the tariff, right? I think that's what we should be comparing to.
Okay, so wait, I forgot what you just said. Hold on. So you said if they make the same amount of profit, right? They'll still employ the same amount of people, or actually more people because now they're employing Americans.
I'm saying no. What? I'm saying I am saying that a tariff on one good, which, by the way, if Ribcast, if he wants to join, okay, I will too. I can join. Okay, I don't mind. I don't mind talking to him as well. But like, I'm saying, if
I gotta go in 5 minutes to dinner, but yeah.
Okay, well, I can talk to Ribcast 101 if he wants to too. I think he streams or whatever. But
yeah,
it just seems like basically trivially.
Yo, what's up, guys?
What's up, Ribcast? Continue.
It seems like basically like trivially true, like in the same way if you tax if you tax any input for a firm, that firm is worse off, and generally you would expect less employment in that industry or in that firm because they have like a higher cost of production, and that's going to negatively affect either them on like it's going to shift their marginal cost curve, and it's going to have some, depending on the demand conditions, negative effect on the quantity they sell or on the price that they sell at. And, some combination of those two are going to adjust to make the firm worse off, and you're probably going to have less employment.
So let me just steal my. So you're saying they'll be making less profits because the demand issue?
Okay.
I may be wrong.
Do you think let's say that nails, the only input for nails is, or the only like raw materials input for nails is steel. Let's just assume that's the case. And you just need steel and workers and like some machines to make nails. Okay. Do you think that there's more people working in the nail industry if steel cost $1 million compared to if steel cost $1?
If they're selling the steel for $2 million compared to they're selling the steel for $2.
Dear God.
More.
Hold.
The hypothetical have a problem with it. The hypothetical have a problem with it. So.
Okay.
if they're making $1 million per profit, they'll be actually employing more people. So
assume demand conditions close to what you think is the case in the real world. Do you think that there is like more employment when steel it costs $1 million in the nail industry compared to when steel costs $1 in the nail industry.
If they're making 10%, actually, if they're making 10% net margins, they'll be this actually more for the 1 million because 10% of net margins of 1 million is a lot more.
So again, let's pretend we live in a real world, okay, where if steel costs $1 million, probably there would not be many nails being made in the U.S. because people are not willing to pay $1 million plus the cost of labor and the cost of maintaining the machinery for nails, right?
That's just I feel like that's a false. I feel like that's some type of logical fallacy because this steel costing $1 million is just not real. Like, and that's not what.
Oh my God.
That's a bad hypothetical. If you said like $15, right? Maybe that's a better argument. But I would say if people still need their nails, right, and if the price going up is gradual and not as bad as everyone, as bad as everyone says it is, right? So if it's like if it goes from $1 to $5, the demand will still stay the same because the price jump up isn't as bad compared to $1 to $1 million.
I don't think you understand the words I'm saying.
Well, the hypothetical was not great because that's just not explaining what a tariff would do.
You don't think the tariff increases the cost of production?
Obviously, if someone could buy something for $1, it'd be more than $1 million. But that's also just an extreme hypothetical.
Do you think the tariff placed on an intermediate good increases the cost of production for firms absent compared to the counterfactual?
It depends how much the tariff is. If the tariff is 100%, then depends.
What do you mean? Unless there's a negative tariff, it's going to increase the cost of production for the firm absent the tariff existing.
Okay, if something's $1, right, and it goes up to $5, right, the prices go up. I still think it's not as big. People will still buy it for that price if it's. That's not my argument.
But you're still increasing the cost of production relative to the tariff not existing, right?
They're still increasing the cost of production, but they're making the same amount of profit, and so people can use that profit the same way if it was steel was $1 compared to if it was $5. If the profit's still the same, that's all that matters.
No, because the profit would be higher in the world where the tariff didn't exist, right?
Yeah, but here's the thing, right? That would just be one business. They would probably lower the prices because if you take the tariff off, right, the price would go down, right, because of competition. But two, I still think that would just be taking away the whole point of the tariff, which is to protect manufacturing.
Oh my God. Okay, you understand. So again, I'd like to reiterate that what I'm trying to demonstrate here is that if you raise the cost of production of an input, you might, via a tariff, you might protect jobs in, for example, the steel industry in whatever thing you're putting the tariff on, but you're going to harm jobs in sectors that rely on that input. Therefore, the net effect of employment will oftentimes be negative, and this is supported by the empirical evidence that we have on tariffs during Trump's first term. Political Ranger can come up too if he wants to. I think he's spamming in chat as well.
Political Ranger. Yeah.
Yeah. So from what I've heard from you, saying that it's harmful, right? So it's basically harmful in your stance of tariffs.
Tariffs generally are harmful. Yes, that is my belief.
Then could you explain how most of our history in the US that we have been funded by tariffs?
Yeah, so I think in the past, government spending as a percentage of GDP was just like much lower. Like government spending during the time of high tariffs in like the 1800s was, only like 3% of GDP. Nowadays, government spending as a percentage of GDP is closer to like 25%. It's closer to 30% if you include, or I think it's like 18% for federal government spending and like it's all close to 30%, if not a bit over 30% for government and state spending. So back then we didn't need as much revenue and we didn't have as much state capacity to collect all the complex taxes and such we do now. And tariffs generally are just an easier tax to administer. It is easier to just look at what's coming in through your ports and tax it, as opposed to have a complex income tax system or even some type of sales tax system that on the national level. Although we don't have a fully national sales tax here, to be fair. I don't think that just because we had tariffs in the past under different conditions suggests that even back then the tariffs were net positive, right? So we could imagine that, just because we had tariffs in the past, we would actually be better off if we didn't have those tariffs in the past and instead relied on other funding mechanisms to fund our government, and taxes that cause less deadweight loss.
But a tariff is always a net positive at the long run.
No.
It's always been one because okay, when you put a tariff on a foreign product, it gets it to a level to the native product, which incentivizes the native
Well, not
product
necessarily.
to be purchased rather than foreign one because they're at equal ground. It encourages people to, hey, why don't we just contribute back to the country? And the tariff, one of the main reasons for tariffs is that what companies do, foreign companies do, is they bring their products, then when they get all their revenue, they bring it back to their country, which removes a lot of the money that's circulated in our country,
Right.
to
So
their country.
so that's not the case because American dollars.
When
it
there's
just-
less, no, let me explain
Okay.
this. When
Mhm.
there is less money in circulation, it creates more inflation because you need
What?
the same amount of money. It does.
When there's less money in circulation, it causes more inflation.
In fact, when you affect anything of the circulation of money, it causes a net negative.
What?
Because when there's less money in the country, there's less to buy. When there's less to buy,
Okay, everything you're saying here is incoherent. So first of all, if you would expect, generally speaking, if you were to decrease the money supply or decrease the velocity of money, both ways of, or both like what I take to mean, decreasing the amount of money in circulation, you would expect that to have a deflationary effect. You would expect the rate of inflation to slow because of that, because the money supply is lower and it's changing hands less often. Second of all, it's not even factually accurate, right? So when other countries get our dollars, those dollars end up buying either U.S. bonds, U.S. assets,
reserves
or
for other countries.
Yeah, those are
Reserves.
In other words, they buy.
For international trade, because the US dollar is very
correct, because we're an intermediary. We're an intermediary currency. Okay, but our dollars being held in reserves is mostly people investing in U.S. treasuries. Okay, now maybe you don't think it's a good thing.
The U.S. dollar is extremely predictable, and it's
why? Wait, why?
When you use a
why?
predictable currency for international trade, it's much easier to trade with others, including in local areas.
Wait, correct. So I just want to be clear. This is the money that goes to other countries. It does not disappear. It goes to buying U.S. assets, right? It goes to investing in the U.S., investing in large part in U.S. bonds, in U.S. treasuries, which, allows our government to borrow more cheaply. It probably gives us some, more stability with regards to having a higher debt to GDP ratio. But a lot of it also goes to either buying U.S. exports or buying like U.S. Assets, equity assets, like things like stocks that trade on the international market. Other countries need U.S. dollars to buy those stocks, and that probably helps our country grow and stuff as well. So it's not even factually accurate that the money just like disappears. That it goes to our capital account surplus, and that's probably a good thing for the U.S. Now, also, you say we're going to incentivize. A tariff is good. Wait, just
their countries of origin. What it does. It generally slows down the economy. For example, it causes an increase in interest rates. It also drops consumer spending, which consumer spending is the incentive for a product. For example, innovation and keeping the price to a said degree is the incentive for people to keep purchasing. When people have less money, because the money that was in circulation has dropped down because that money was brought to a different place, it basically the people there can't spend anymore. So
none of this is coherent.
Buying, and then it slows down. Well, sure, you could for example, you could say sometimes they drop price because demand falls, but it's not good. It's not good because when there's less money, people
so
are
none of this.
buy.
None of this is coherent. None of this is coherent. Anyone can look up,
the capital
account.
Search that stuff up.
No, everyone could
Bro.
look up the capital account surplus and such.
example-
Okay, like it's just not the case. This money like disappears, and if it did disappear, you'd expect a like negative effect on inflation, and also the fact that they do buy U.S. Treasuries and stuff, or do invest in U.S. assets, that actually depresses interest rates, that lowers interest rates, that does not raise interest rates. If more people are willing to lend to the U.S., you would expect generally lower interest rates, and it probably is a good thing that our government is able to borrow cheaply and we're able to sustain high debt to GDP ratios. That's probably better than the counterfactual of not being able to do that. So I also want to go back to a point you made that tariffs are always good in the long run. The first thing you said, because people
they
like
are,
produce
because-
people like produce things here and such. Okay, so there's an opportunity cost to doing so, right? So it's the same thing as like saying with regards to like some technological advancement. It's a better thing that we dig this ditch with a bunch of people using spoons instead of like a bunch of people using shovels or a few people using bulldozers, because there's more jobs created when we dig this ditch with a spoon, right? We wouldn't want people to be hurt by not having the spoon jobs. We don't want spoon jobs because there's an opportunity cost to having the spoon jobs, which is people working in more productive sectors, right? People specializing in what they're good at, or countries specializing in what they're good at, and countries experiencing gains from scale and gains from
No, but that's harmful to our country because it makes us dependent on others. The whole point for the U.S. is for us to be self-reliant in that aspect.
So I disagree. That's the whole point to the U.S. is idiotic. But
Dylan, can you like fact check me? Like back in the 1940s and 30s, we were like extremely industrial. Now we're just service based. And guess what has happened? There's no industry.
He said he agrees with that.
Yeah, but still.
I agree that the manufacturing share of employment was higher in the past, right?
We are the dominant power of the planet.
Okay, but so first of all, you saying we shouldn't be relying on other people, to me strikes me as much separate argument than saying a tariff is always good in the long run by nature, creating jobs and all these great things.
But you're thinking like an actual business person. You're thinking of like, hey, what it benefits me because I'm outsourcing. But no, we have to think like the government. What benefits our people, and what benefits our people is the tariff because it incentivizes homemade products to be bought because they're at the CE because they're going to be at an equal pricing as foreign products, which helps with circulation, and then it's basically a domino effect where it basically increases the economy.
Wow. Okay, so like I said, your point about circulation is incoherent. I would encourage you to the view is so mistaken that I don't know where to get you started on understanding how it's wrong. But I don't know, open some economics textbook and maybe watch a few videos about the balance of payments and stuff. Okay, I think there are concerns you can have about the balance of payments that the U.S. has that are not totally invalid, but your view is just incoherent because it's not actually the case that the money just disappears. And if it did, you would expect a deflationary effect, not an inflationary effect, and you would also expect lower.
But it would cause less consumer spending, which generally slows down the economy.
What are you saying causes less consumer spending?
Capitalism is growth. It's like, for example, it's like, how do I say this? It's like you're at the gym and then you're doing your routine, and then you get to a certain level, but then you keep doing the exact same routine you did that day. You're not growing, but you're staying still. Your progress.
So number one, because so they're just very narrowly gains from specialization in economics, right? So it is actually better for people to specialize in certain tasks and doing the same task.
Sure,
and
specialize, but we shouldn't depend on others. We should be self-reliant on that fact.
Okay. So when you say we shouldn't depend on others, is that you saying that growth is slower when we depend on others, or that where our economic welfare
growth is slower because, for example, it slows down our technological innovation because, for example, we basically gave all of our technology to China when the first iPhone came out, and we had to make Android. And
what
by basically giving it off to other countries, the fields that we were dominant in, it made us slow down and be less how do I say this? Less advanced in that field. For example, we used to be the most advanced in what was it?
like phones and computers.
I'm
Now
doing
it's
it. I'm
like
doing it because
Taiwan or
it makes me
China,
feel so
which
great.
we should be the best ones. We're literally the biggest. We're the biggest country economically and everything. We shouldn't depend on others like that. We should
Okay.
depend on ourselves.
When you say best, what do you mean?
Hmm?
When you say we're the best at, we're like we should be the best at producing a given thing. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, yeah. Production. We were one of the best in production in our time.
By what
back in
metric? I mean,
industrial.
okay, so this is like incoherent, right? So I don't know what I expected from you. Honestly, I don't know what I expected. So, but there's
And why do you go to that level of insulting?
because you're very silly on this point. I don't.
I've let you set your own points. I've been respectful, and you're just
that's
going
great.
off, interrupting and being insulting.
True. So I kind of thought there was like going to be like some mistake you're making between like absolute and competitive advantage, but I think you're too silly to even really know what I'm saying there.
Why the hell do you result into insulting?
Because because you shouldn't speak confidently about these issues when you don't know like when your view is just totally incoherent and total nonsense like yours is, right? Like I think it's just like
explaining. You're not explaining why my points. You're not explaining.
I feel like I have.
So
I feel like I have explained multiple times. So I explained. You're just like everything you said about the balance of payments is just like I think incoherent. And then I've also explained that they're like you should care about the opportunity cost of doing certain things here, right? So it's not the case that like just because you have like more like work here or something that like we're better off overall, because there are gains from specialization and there are gains from economies of scale. And I think those are both like helped by trade. And it seems like national welfare, overall productivity actually goes up when countries engage in free trade. There's also just effects from like the spread of like technology and the spread of technological knowledge that like is also helped by free trade that increases innovation and growth, like Japan experienced this.
What increases advancement is actually incentive, which is what we're offering through tariffs.
Right, but you're displacing other production, right?
What?
Okay, so if you currently like 80% of the workforce or whatever in the U.S. is like employed in the service sector, right?
No, yeah, of course. Well, for basic economics, for anybody to grow at anything economically, you should diversify investment, which is what we lack.
We lack investment.
That's the point.
We lack
no. We lack we
just
lack
diversification.
We lack diversity in investment.
Okay.
Diversity.
Interesting.
For example, okay, here's an example. Let's say one person invests stock in Coca-Cola, but one person invests like for example, this guy.
So I don't need an example. I understand the principle why you should be diversified. I understand the principle why you should be diversified.
Let me explain. So for example, this person invests, let's say he buys 10% of stock from Coca-Cola.
I understand the principle. You hedge risk by being invested in multiple industries because you're not susceptible to a shock in any given industry. No, because there's no need. There's no benefit to you doing it. There's no benefit to you doing it. I understand. Okay. I understand. Okay. I'm going to set up a 401k soon. I just got an employer that like will match my contributions. I'm going to be my portfolio is going to be so diverse. It's going to be.
How the hell are we going to be able to debate if you don't allow me to explain?
Because I know what you're saying. Do you think I don't understand why individuals should diversify?
I'm allowing you to explain your points. Allow me to explain mine.
I already know. I'm telling you, I know why people should diversify. You don't think I know that individuals like can hedge risk by investing in a diversified portfolio of assets as opposed to investing in like only one asset or one category of asset?
Jesus fucking Christ. Can you leave? I don't
know.
I
think he's getting dinner. I don't know.
Jesus fucking Christ. I allow you to... First of all, I've been respectful towards you. You have been interrupting. You have been insultive. I have been allowing you to just say your own fucking terms, okay? So please, allow me to fucking explain my analogy. Okay?
Yeah, okay.
So let's say this. Person A, he buys 10% of stock in Coca-Cola. But then person B, oh my fucking God. So let's say person B, he instead buys 1% Walmart, 1% Coca-Cola, 1% fucking McDonald's, Burger King, Chick-fil-A, and like some other to reach exactly 10%. He owns like 1% of everything. And let's say that year the stock for Coca-Cola falls. Person A is gonna fucking lose. But for example, person B who invested in Coca-Cola won't lose as much, and he can recover from that loss because he diversified his investment. That's what the US should do. Because, for example, the USA depends on services. That's wrong, because if we depend solely on one market, and if that market falls, we can't recover from the loss. Which, that's why we need to diversify our sectors in the economy. We should diversify to industrial, and services, whatever, just anything. Diversify to more and more sectors. So if one sector of that economy falls, the other parts of that economy can pick it back up and recover from the losses.
Wait, I don't understand. Can you explain what you mean by? Can you explain it with the Pepsi thing again? I'm confused. I don't get it.
So basically, let's say person A and B. Okay, A buys they have to buy the equivalent of 10%, both of them. So person A
Wait, but
buys 10%
no one has that
of
much money.
Coca-Cola.
I'm confused. How is this happening? I'm so lost.
I'm using a fucking analogy. It's a fucking example. Jesus fucking Christ.
I don't get it.
Bro, Dylan, did you understand what I said?
I just got back.
Okay, Dylan.
I understand what you said, bro. I understood what you were doing before you said it. Okay, I'm being an asshole. I understand what you're saying. Okay, so
Yo, not
Bro.
fun. You gotta be trolling, bro. You're fucking trolling.
trolling
Like,
about
bro,
what?
you said you
Trolling
know
about
what
not.
the
Wait.
fuck
I
I'm
was
gonna
trolling.
say.
I
Now
was
you
trolling
don't
about
know
not
what the fuck I
understanding
said.
about not
Jesus
understanding the
fucking
analogy. Okay,
Christ.
I understand the analogy. I understand the analogy. Okay, I was trolling about
No,
that
you
part.
did not
Okay.
understand the fucking
You were the
analogy
one.
because
You don't think I
said
understood the
enough
analogy? I'm about to
because you didn't say
demonstrate. I understood it. I understand. I understand. I understand. So I
Bro,
understand.
okay, Dylan, let me explain my
Jesus.
analogy.
Oh, I
When
shouldn't
you're
have
present.
trolled.
So,
I
bro,
just saw
okay,
Ribcast. What Ribcast
Okay,
said.
Dylan, let me explain this to you. So,
No, you don't.
this
I
analogy.
understand. I understand. People should. You
I'm
want the
explaining
economy
it to
to be
fucking
diversified
Dylan.
because if
I'm
a shock
explaining it to
affects one
fucking
sector,
Dylan.
you want to be able to
I
have
said
sectors that aren't
Dylan.
affected by
I
the
said
shock.
Dylan. I'm
I
saying it
know
to
what you're
fucking
saying. There's no
explain
point.
Dylan.
You're appealing to
Holy
Dylan
fucking
because you think
shit.
I need because you think there's something I need to
Holy
understand that I don't understand.
Holy
I already
fucking shit. Can you
understand. I'm
shut the
telling you, I
fuck
already
up? Can you
understand.
shut
You
the
want to be
fuck up?
diversified. You
Can
don't
you
want to be
shut the
susceptible
fuck
to a
up?
shock in a given
Can you
sector.
shut
You don't
the
want to be.
fuck
You don't
up?
want to be
No,
entirely
you're
susceptible to a
Jesus
shock in a given
fucking
sector. Okay.
Christ.
You don't want your economy to be
Jesus
100% dependent on
fucking
oil
Christ.
because if something happens to
Jesus
oil,
fucking
you're gonna be screwed.
Can you
You want to
shut the fuck
hedge.
up?
You want to hedge your
Can
bets.
you shut the fuck up?
I
Can you
know
shut
what you're
the fuck
saying.
up?
There's nothing interesting that you're gonna
Shut the
say.
fuck up. I'm not saying it to you. I'm saying it to Dylan.
Cam.
But you're only saying it to Dylan
Wait.
because you think I don't
saying it
understand,
to
but I
Dylan
just
this
demonstrated to you I do
example, okay?
understand.
Yo.
I'm
So
trying to explain to Dylan, okay?
wait, I got a question. So how come when Political Ranter explained his entire analogy, then you said you didn't understand his analogy, and then when he tries to explain it again, then you say you
I was
already
joking because I
understand it?
understood.
Holy shit.
I
Then
understood
you're
what the.
trolling, bro.
That's a
You
weird
I
way of
I
saying
was
that.
trolling. Wait, I was trolling when I said I didn't understand. Okay, I was playing Subway
Oh, it's
Surfers.
okay, it's
Okay,
okay.
I was playing Subway Surfers and acting like a dumbass. Okay, I was being an asshole. Okay, my bad. Okay, but I understand the point about diversification. Okay, I understood it before you said it, which is why I thought it would be a waste of time for him to explain his analogy because I already understand the point. And
Well, that's
lo and behold, I was right. I already understood the point. Okay, so
But
I
no,
agree that
I'm
there
trying
are
to
certain.
explain again to Dylan because now he's present. Okay.
You don't need
Uh,
wine.
Okay. Let me use a better
Jesus.
explanation. Okay. So when you start depending on only one sector and that sector falls, you can't recover from the losses. So the tariffs incentivize diversifying into different sectors in the economy. So for example, the USA depends solely on services the most. And if the services economy falls, we can't recover from that loss. So to recover from that loss, you diversify sectors. You make more sectors, for example, service, industrial, farming, and everything. Because when there's multiple revenue streams, there's multiple ways to recover from the loss if one sector falls. You understand that, Dylan? That's what the tariffs do. They incentivize diversifying into multiple sectors in the economy.
which gives a safety net. Safety net. It provides a safety net.
Now, what is non-farm pricing?
Yeah, okay. So for one, I think to the extent that's a concern, you can fix that pretty easily with just having trade and financial assets as well, because individuals and the country as a whole will be able to own shares and assets in companies that are manufacturing overseas, right? So I think free trade and assets fixes that. I also think that like there's sort of an optimal amount of like hedging and diversification that you should have. So it's not clear to me why like the government would know what that optimal amount is as opposed to the market. I think the market probably does a pretty decent job at like at deciding that for themselves. Individuals are probably do a fairly decent job at that, and as a whole the nation probably does as well. And the service sector is not like a sector that is going to be particularly subject to like a common shock. So you don't want your country to be like 100% dependent on oil, because oil is like one commodity, and movements in its price can be affected by any number of things, and it will have major implications in your economy, right? But the service sector is not like one commodity. It's not like one product. It's a bunch of different products across a bunch of different industries, software, financial services, insurance. Like there's so many things that like it's diverse enough within the broad sector that I think it's not a huge concern. And I also think it would have like some implication of like should we like also like try to increase agricultural employment a bunch for like diversification reasons? Like probably not, right? The opportunity cost of that is probably just too high.
Of course, we have to incentivize it because, for example, manual labor like electricians, plumbers, it's actually decreasing. It's actually receding. And for example, why the fuck we should reinvest in foreign economies
To diversify.
No. That's not the whole point of fucking diversifying. The whole point of diversifying is local businesses to diversify into different sectors. Because
what if you don't want to be subject to the whims of a common shock to your local sector?
No. Because we're investing into different countries. The whole point is to invest back into the country to incentivize growth. Why the fuck aren't we being pro-America? America
to diversify.
First.
If you care about diversification.
Well, he doesn't believe America first.
Oh my fucking what? That's stupid.
I'm just saying you are concerned about diversification, right?
Bro,
so if that's like your big concern, just have free trade and assets as well.
You prioritize your own country.
But okay, but do you understand the principle of what I'm getting at when I say it's not really it's only a problem in your view because not only do you care about diversification, but you care about diversification like in some sense prioritizing your own country, right? You can have diversification, you can be invested in a bunch of different manufacturing sectors if you allow free trade and assets, because you can invest in a manufacturing sector.
No, the free trade
God.
from foreign products actually decentivizes local grown products and industries.
Because, that's not what I'm talking about right now.
Because for example, there's always going to be someone better than you. But the best way you have to learn to be not depend on them is if you learn how to do it yourself. Like for example, why the fuck would I pay a plumber if I can learn how to do it myself?
Should Tiger Woods mow his own lawn? Should Tiger Woods mow his own lawn? Should Tiger Woods mow his own lawn?
Why should we depend on China for like fucking spoons instead we could make our own spoons?
I'll answer that with an analogy. Should Tiger Woods mow his own lawn?
What?
Do you know who Tiger Woods is? Like that example is kind of outdated now. Should LeBron James mow his own lawn?
Chinese dude to do it. Wait, I think I understand what Ranter is trying to say. He's trying to say that.
Wait, I want to. Like but I want an answer. Should LeBron James mow his own lawn?
Bro, that analogy was used to show you that we should not depend on countries.
I'm asking you a question. If you think that LeBron James, it would be like, rational is a weird term, but like it'd be profit maximizing of LeBron James to mow his own lawn.
I mean, if LeBron James is physically capable of fucking mowing his own lawn and he has the money, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if he has the money and he's physically capable. He can do either one.
Yo, guys.
I'm confused what you mean by that.
I need to go. Right, it's 9:45.
Okay.
I need to go. But it's a great debating you, non-fun. I don't know how you feel about Political Ranger, but Thanks
Well,
for
I
coming
want to
on.
keep. I want to keep talking to them. I can start my
Wait,
own
one-
stream if
one
they
thing
want.
before
Or
we
How about
leave?
this, Political Ranger? How about you follow Political Ranger? He's gonna be live probably. He could go live.
Yo,
I gotta
one
go.
thing
I
before
don't
we
know.
leave,
I'm
bro.
trying to be. I'm trying to finish some work right now.
of
So I
course.
was just looking at Nonfon's profile, bro. You're so handsome, bro.
Wow.
Okay, don't
Thanks.
this kid. Don't listen to Ribcast. The guy's like, he loves Jeffrey Epstein. So
What?
Incredible.
No,
Yo,
no,
that
no.
is
He,
not
he loves
true,
the
bro.
IDF. He loves the IDF.
Yo, that is not
Nice.
true.
he loves Epstein. He loves the IDF. He loves Israel. He loves Benjamin Netanyahu. So don't listen to him. Okay.
Well,
He's not a good
BB
guy.
is kind of cute, bro. I'll see you
exactly.
guys.
See ya.
Wait,
Thank
do you want
for
to come
coming
on?
And Cam's a go. I love the profile picture, Cam.
Wow.
See ya.
Thank you.
I want to answer if LeBron James should mow his own lawn.
Your name is.
I don't know if they think he should or not. I don't know if they think he should. Oh my god, bruh. Debate me? Who are you, Absorb Toast, if you want to? About what? Marxism? Maybe, bro. I don't know. Are you into? I think you left the Discord server. But welcome back, everyone. Sauce Rama, Najuin. I saw Chifringo here as well. I have 4K. Who are you? I'm not fun. I saw Easy Money too. Welcome back, everyone. I might continue chatting with him. We'll see. I need the Ripcast guy. I don't think followed me back. Yo, what's good? Send. Absorb Toast. I don't know, depending on exactly what you want to talk about, I might not be interested, but you can join the waiting room. I can drag you in. I love fun, enjoy listening to you, but please simply rude. Better man. Okay. I feel like during most of that, I wasn't like particularly rude. I was rude when I started playing Subway Surfers. But for one, that was funny. And for two, it's like rude in a different way, in like an epistemic way. for people to like comment on stuff, it have a super strong opinion, but the view was just like totally incoherent. Like everything he said about the balance of payments was just like totally incoherent. He won't even answer my question about whether LeBron James should mow his own lawn, right? Like this is just like an incoherent view, indefensible. He can't defend it, and that's why it's funny to make fun of him. I have a challenge for you. What's up, Sandstorm? This Absorb Toast guy ain't even in the waiting room. I never knew less money circulation was the cause of our inflation. Yeah, I don't even the mechanism there didn't even make sense. With that being said, he was trolling us. That's his official opinion. I don't think he was. I think that's his genuine opinion and stuff. If I can get a score of 90% on a deductive reasoning test, I will gift you a sub. It takes 5 minutes. Okay, I guess I look forward to it. Sandstorm 2000. Or if you can, sorry. I thought you said if I can. Okay. I don't want to do that right now. I don't know if I would get. I'm not a. I don't know. I don't know if I would get 90% of the deductive reasoning tests, but he sounded upset and dumb. He did sound upset and dumb. Okay, I'll talk to him later this week. There's this other dude.
And there are children that are being
said he
bombed
might
every.
come on as well, but he's not online on TikTok. A debater would have no problem achieving that. Yeah, but I'm dumb. What's up, Momentum? Oh, you just got here? Oh, you missed yeah, some interesting stuff. Okay. Oh. I don't know. This is know what's happening.
Whoa, here I am. Wow, that was a riveting debate on frickin' tariffs with a National Socialist. Great choice of debate.
I mean, I saw his stuff where he talked about tariffs and some other of his beliefs. And
yeah, it's perfect. I mean, a liberal sees a guy talking about deporting all people of color, and they go straight for the, well, hold on the tariff question. I might own you.
well,
on this tariff
I asked him
issue.
to talk about immigration too. We didn't get to that, but
Right.
I was open to talking to him, about that stuff to him too. But like, I don't know. I don't think I always have to debate like what I think the most like important issue in the world is. Right? I think it's interesting.
So. I think it's probably the most heinous belief. You should be the one that you target, not small scale hour-and-a-half debates where nobody gets a single actual point about tariffs. Like, what is even?
But I don't think
goal?
we would have gotten a
beyond?
single meaningful point about immigration either, right?
You would have at least exposed his ideas for what they are, rather than now people
His ideas are out there. I think the marginal
like,
effect of that would be pretty low.
I mean, the epic dunk that he might be wrong on tariffs is like really gonna waver people's opinions.
I mean, I doubt like he had like 8 viewers at, like.
I mean, I got it's interesting. It's spot on that would be the liberal choice to go after. It's like economics. It's capitalist economics every single time over like humanity. It's just.
But I don't know. I've debated people about immigration too, and like deportations and stuff. Like that's something I have. Some...
Well, I mean, he didn't just have anti-immigration. He had also pro shipping people back to. I'm assuming.
Yeah, I debated people about deportations as well,
yeah.
and like.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't think I have a general obligation to like always engage in like the single biggest like impact debate or whatever.
I think that what it is like, this tariff thing is like a really easy like own on these small little in-betweens, and that's just what you go with.
Well, I mean, it's just something I know a decent amount about because I just do immigration or like economic stuff more often. Like I just read about it on my own time more. So.
Right. Well, why aren't you a socialist then? If you read so much about economics, you should be a Marxist, no?
No.
Why not?
And so depending on what you mean by Marxist, like depending on the exact model that you want to go for, I think it's going to have different problems. So if you just want to, you'd have to specify exactly which model you want to. End up as
communism, socialism
of communism, yeah, or of whatever you think is the next step.
Yeah, I would go by the model Marx lays out in Gotha program. So just general dictatorship of the proletariat into socialism into communism.
Right, but I think there's like what I'm looking for is like some idea of like we're gonna have worker co-ops, or we're gonna have a sovereign wealth fund, or we're gonna have like government ownership with like workers councils, like some combination of these ideas. I think they have different implications.
Those are different stages. For socialism, we would have workers owning the means of production totally, and then for end goal communism, you would move into like more centrally planned government controlled economies in addition to that. So, but yeah, for socialism, workers owning the means of production, that's a big next step that we could do.
Okay, well, sure, but I'm saying there are different ways you can own the means of production. So I laid out like 3 of them. You could have a worker co-ops, you could have sovereign wealth funds, you could have like direct government ownership, state-owned enterprises. I'm looking for like some.
Yeah, I would say worker co-ops would be how socialism would be truly described. I mean, state-owned wouldn't be
Okay.
necessarily workers owning the means unless you're going to say that the state is directly reflective of the workers. If you had like a truly
Yeah.
democratic state, then you could potentially do a system in that way.
So I think the reason I wouldn't prefer that system is I think generally worker co-ops are probably not going to be as efficient at allocating labor and capital as traditional firms. So I think there's for some firms are going to have a very high return to capital, but not as high a return to labor on the margin. And some firms are going to be the opposite. They're going to have a relatively high return to labor, but not a very high return to capital on the margin. And therefore, under the system we have now, firms with a very high return to capital or firms with a very high return to labor will be able to get that labor or be able to get that capital in 9 times out of 10. In a worker co-op world, though, you're forcing firms to accept labor and capital together. So there could be firms with a very high return to like capital who have to get that capital by accepting more workers when there really isn't any need for more workers. And you're just going to generally lead to a less efficient allocation of labor and capital. And there's going to be some incentive of co-ops to under-hire because doing so dilutes the capital that each of the individual workers has relative to traditional firms. And there's just going to be added labor market friction because workers have to like buy in and sell out of firms. And that is going, all of those things are going to combine to probably higher unemployment, persistently higher unemployment, and just overall less efficient allocation of labor and capital.
Yeah, sure. I'll touch on first the hiring less people. I mean, when you're increasing your labor pool, that is also upscaling your business. I mean, obviously, it would dilute the ownership pool, but businesses aren't going to want to stagnate, and you're still seeing a return on profit when you upscale a business by bringing in more people, expanding your production. So that would be one. Why
we're talking about the margin here, though, right? So like, there's going to be workers who a traditional firm, like the marginal worker. A traditional firm will hire, but because the co-op has to incur another cost, which is diluting the share of the company held by the existing people there,
a traditional firm has to incur a cost. A traditional firm has to incur a cost of now paying another worker, same cost.
No, it's not the same cost because they don't have to deal with the ownership, right? The ownership's not diluted.
But that's the payment. That's the trade-off of acquiring another employee. A traditional firm has to pay them a salary. A worker co-op would have to give partial ownership.
But they also have to pay them a salary.
No, they're rewarded in the profit that they make from their labor.
What? So those are ownership in a company is like an asset you own that entitles you to the future cash flow of the company. That's different than just being paid in like current period profits, right? So when I hear worker co-op, I think the worker like has some legal ownership of the company, and they are therefore entitled to profits in future periods, right? They have some. So that is different than simply not having any ownership and receiving a salary. If a traditional firm is it only has to pay the salary, they only have to pay out the salary every period. They don't have to give any ownership. A worker co-op has to not only hand over some of their profits, but hand over some of the ownership itself, which entitles them to future profits.
You're saying it right there, handing over some of their profits. You're adding on another profit generating source to your business. That it's not like you're not just getting another. If you're getting another employee and you're not seeing an increase in profit, then that business is failing. That business is making poor business choices. So
right. But you're changing the
business needs more employees. They will hire, despite the dilution of the ownership pool. You will still see the same return of profit.
Only if the return to the worker is higher than the cost to the workers of diluting the ownership and the return that the worker would generate for the company, right? A traditional firm only has to worry about how much the worker would make for the company. A worker co-op not only has to worry about the return that the worker would make to the company, but also the cost of diluting everyone's ownership shares.
The ownership shares is not the main source of your profit as a worker in a worker co-op, though. That is just your.
But it's an asset you have that you have to give out or you have to dilute.
Sure, but I would expect if I'm hiring another person, maybe my share goes from 12% to 10%, but the value of that share should scale correctly with the person that I just hired, with the business expansion that I just made. And if
they're going to be workers on the margin, so the marginal. the marginal worker, the traditional firm is going to hire because it's going to increase their profits, and it's not going to have any effect on ownership. But the worker co-op, even if the worker has a positive effect on profit, they might not hire the person because they have to dilute the ownership. So the marginal worker, they're not going to hire.
You're only diluting the percentage ownership, but the value of your ownership would go up in the same way. You're just diluting.
Okay,
the
but that doesn't happen at all for the traditional firm. So the marginal worker, the traditional firm will find it profitable to hire. The marginal worker,
which is
co-op
why
will not.
A traditional firm would be less efficient in hiring. As you're seeing, if you're making incorrect hiring choices as a worker co-op, you're incurring actual tangible effects in the stake and value of your company. So that this is a pro to worker
so that's an argument about
hiring and firing.
That's an argument about essentially like some type of like quality effect of like giving workers a stake and such, and there are mechanisms by which that can be true. And I think to the extent it is true, like traditional firms will often find it profitable to pay workers more, give them ownership of some ownership of the company because of that, if it really does increase total profits. But
no, a traditional firm would never do that,
so,
because the way it's structured, you would never do that, because no matter how much increase in profit that your workers are going to have, you as the owner of the 90% share, you will never dilute that. You'll never dilute that.
But a lot of companies do have
off a little bit of your power.
Plenty of companies do have employee stock ownership plans, right? The company I work at has employee stock ownership plans.
Yeah, but you understand that an employee stock ownership plan, you are only getting a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a share of the company. And when we're talking about workers owning the means, we're talking about owning like a substantial portion of the company, not stock dividends.
Yeah, but I think that's what raises
1% of 1%.
That's what raises the cost of hiring people for a co-op relative to a traditional firm, right? That's what's going to make
that also forces that co-op to be more efficient in their hiring and to be more efficient in their business choices.
I don't know what you mean by forces to be more efficient.
Because as I said, if you're overhiring or underhiring, you're seeing each worker suffer the harms of both of those choices. Whereas for a traditional firm, you're only seeing the CEO making his choices. If he maybe is fine with not having to pay more wages, but his salary is going down a little bit for the year, then he could just do that. Or if he just wants to hire more people, he would hire more people because he's the only one being affected and the only one making choices.
Right. So I think
if you're a liberal that believes in democracy, I don't see how you could not apply that ideology to the workplace as well, if democracy is such a good system.
True. Okay. So I think it's to some extent a benefit of traditional firms as well that workers don't bear some of the risk associated with decisions about hiring and the overall performance of a firm. I don't think that you should. It's not necessarily smart to have your human capital and labor. Your capital and labor like invested in the same place, right? Like if I work at
why? That's aligned interest.
Because you're not diversified, right? So if you think about like, for example, the China shock. There are people who were negatively affected by the China shock because the place where they worked, the job they had, that was like offshored or whatever. If they had been in a worker co-op, not only would they have had their job be offshored, but they would lose the ownership share of the firms, like all the assets they held, most of which would probably be in the firm they worked at. The value of those would go down as well. If you don't have your capital tied up in the same place as your labor, you can be more diversified. You can be more you can survive those shocks.
Yeah, sure.
Better.
I would agree that a traditional firm would have a better ability to change on a dime, the same way that a strong central figure running a government would have a better chance of reacting to war.
I don't think
not worth it.
So I'm not saying. I'm saying like the worker, right?
Yeah.
Under a traditional market system,
Correct.
They have most of their capital invested in places that aren't where their labor is invested. I have a job, but most of my capital, most of my assets are not at the company I work at. It's in a diversified portfolio.
I mean, if the argument is just because some people in America own stock IRAs, I don't see how that would be a negative of putting more risk into your company going under. You know what I mean? I understand what you're saying, that like if a company goes under and I'm a part owner, now that's all my stuff. Like that's a big risk to be a part owner of a company and then it go under, as opposed to our current system where you can switch job to job. But in that system, you would still be able to find another job.
Is that, if your company goes under, you're only out your job, your source of labor income. You're not out your entire all your assets, all your capital.
Why under a worker co-op would I not also be able to? I don't believe in this.
Well, how are you going to get ownership in other firms?
You don't think that firms would be able to publicize small amounts of
well, maybe small amounts.
Like when you buy stocks, that's what we have right now. When you buy stocks, you're not buying a big share of the company. You're buying a portion of 1%.
Each individual has a small amount of the company, but the company overall is owned by a ton of people, right? It's under a co-op system. Under a co-op system, the companies would only be able to sell at most a small amount of the shares of the company.
However much of that they can sell, however much.
No, because then they wouldn't be a co-op. They can't sell 100% of their company because then they wouldn't be a worker co-op, right?
There's no stock dividends that is 100% of a company.
Okay, then how?
If you're talking about stock and investing, you understand you're not buying portions of the company. You're buying a fraction of a 1% share. When I buy stock in Apple, I'm not a part owner of Apple.
I'm aware. I'm aware.
You can. All right, this can still be done in a worker co-op.
Apple can sell 40%. They can have 40% of their equity owned by other people that aren't working for Apple, right? A co-op probably couldn't do that.
How is that a good thing?
Because it lets capital flow to where it has the highest return on the margin. It doesn't tie capital towards being allocated at the same time as labor, right? Second of all, it means it doesn't limit workers' ability to be diversified, to not have all their capital tied up in where they work, which leaves them susceptible to shocks at where they work, because both their assets and their labor income would be gone if something were to happen to it.
Do you agree that worker co-ops are able to put out stock shares, publicly offered stock shares?
Yes, but at some point they're not a worker co-op anymore.
Well, they're not a worker co-op if the majority of their business would be owned by one person. That's when they're not a worker co-op.
Well, how are you a worker co-op if 51% of your business is owned by people across the country?
Because those are different people owning the business. They aren't making business choices. If you're gonna,
well, if they own half the company, they can make business choices.
In my system, you can make a limit on the amount of stocks that are able to be offered. I mean, you could do that now. You could do that today if you wanted to.
So you can mandate that. I think it'd be bad.
Why? You're saying that it's a bad thing that people aren't able to buy stocks, and then I would say, well, here's a perfectly reasonable way that it would still operate under a worker co-op. It would just require mandation. You're like, well, mandating that would be bad. Well, that's solving the problem.
Sorry, what were you mandating? You were mandating what? Sorry, I might have misunderstood you.
If you could mandate to say that a company is not allowed to put 51% of their business publicly offered or publicly owned.
But that would limit. So if you're limiting outside ownership, you're also limiting people's ability to buy shares, right? Like by necessity, you're limiting how much workers.
Yeah, but the majority of companies today do not operate in the way that you just described. They don't operate in a 51% owned by publicly traded IRA funds or stuff like that. Not IRA, but brokerage funds.
I don't know if the majority of firms are currently are even publicly traded, but
not even publicly traded. So I'm limiting something that's already a very limited source. That's already a very limited thing.
Because you're tying workers to almost every worker would be tied in some fashion. Their assets would be tied to the company. It's currently not the case that's the case.
It should be the case because that aligns intention and that aligns goals. Right now we have a contradiction in the way that firms are created right now. That removes
to the extent that it's the case, I think a lot of firms would find it profitable to have like employee stock ownership programs, or like other performance indicators and such to do that type of things. That's number one. Number two, I can grant in some fashion there might be like a alignment of incentives if workers are part owners at a firm, but conversely, I think you're tying up their labor and capital in the same place. And that's not great because it leaves them susceptible to like a common shock. Again, the China shock example, I'm saying people lost their labor income, but they could still own assets elsewhere. If they were forced to take ownership in their firm, they would lose a lot of their assets and their labor income at the same time and be limited in their ability to invest elsewhere.
but we see this today in shocks that happen today. We see financial crisis that happening under regularly structured firms all the time. And you could say that people can just go find another job, but the same could be said for worker co-op run economy. And just because maybe
Well, no, I think if you're limiting, I think if you're
how many
if you're
people
like
right now do you think in America own stock or have money tied up in stock brokerage accounts?
like
I'm
60+%, I believe, but
of Americans
have some ownership of stock.
true?
Yeah, I believe
What is some ownership?
at least
of
of households.
Okay, well, 60% of Americans. But do you think that when like financial crises happen, like 2008, I mean, that money is also gone. That money is also tied up, and that money is also dwindled down.
Yeah,
in
but
a
I think
way. And
necessarily,
loses value based on
I think
the
necessarily,
whims
if you're
of some
like,
rich people.
if you're limiting the outside ownership of firms, you're also limiting people's ability to buy outside ownership of firms, right?
We're limiting people's ability to buy majority shares of outside firms and then operate them as a king. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you agree there's less like shares of companies available for people to buy?
I think that there would be slightly less in an only worker co-op run thing. Yeah, I think it would be slightly
I think
less
it'd be a
because
bit more
not as
than
many firms would be
slightly less.
incentivized. But I don't think that the existence of a stock market is really what we should be using as our social safety net for people losing jobs. I would say that a worker-led
Well,
economy, a worker-owned
I'm just
economy
saying-
would have such great outcomes for this financial stability, and the average wage and standard of living for these workers would greatly outweigh the risks of one company going under and then you not having a stock brokerage account to fall back on.
So I think we shouldn't. That shouldn't be the only way Americans are, have a safety net, right? I think we should have some type of social safety net. I think there should be welfare and such, right? I think redistribution can be important for its own right sometimes, right? So in principle, but like I think almost necessarily it's just not efficient to have people's labor and capital tied up in the same place.
Well, that critique of labor and capital being tied up only works if like we're saying that stock accounts are going to be our primary fallback for people.
No, because something can make. What do you mean? Something can make you worse off, even if it doesn't. Even if like, well, I think that's all that's necessary for my argument. If it makes you worse off, it's like still a cost that you have to contend with, even if it's not a cost so bad. If you also have a social safety net, like.
Yeah, the pros of being removed from wage labor and having the average wage go up so drastically would vastly outweigh this need for a stock brokerage account.
Okay, so I think the mistakes you make there is sort of like a, I don't know, fallacy of composition is like technically the right term there or whatever, but like it's kind of it's somewhat of a fallacy of composition. So just because like individual worker co-ops right now probably tend to have like higher wages. It wouldn't surprise me if that was the case. Doesn't mean that overall the average wage or even median wage, at least in the long run, or certainly per capita income would be higher if we all switch over to a worker co-op, because I think you're going to lead to the effects I mentioned earlier, like for example, an inefficient allocation of labor and capital, higher structural unemployment. I think like almost necessarily co-ops are going to have a lower incentive to hire people, and there's just going to be more transaction costs involved in hiring and firing people, and those are going to be things that, and there's probably just going to be a lower return to or a lower individual return to certain investments. There might be a there might be a similar return overall if you sell some market-based system, but there's not going to be the same type of return from a that like a capitalist currently has from investing in a company, because you're diluting the ownership shares across all the workers.
Right. I just think when you look at the way a traditional firm is structured, you have, I think it's 80% of the profit is going towards upper level shareholders. How could you possibly say when you redistribute that to workers across a flat-ish a scheme, how could that not vastly boost wages?
Because the incentives that create would probably lower growth, right?
How would that lower growth? I mean, I've seen multiple
by
studies
reducing investment and leading to higher structural unemployment.
That higher structural unemployment would reduce growth?
Generally, probably, yeah.
I mean, if the companies are not employing more people, that means that they're not growing. Why would they not grow in order to return on more investment? Like I said before, you want the value of your ownership in the company to raise. So
Right,
if you're
but if
saying
it's
that they're
higher.
just going to sit and hold onto it just because I have 30% now, but the value would be lower the value would be higher if I hired more people. Why would the workers' goals not be to hire more people, to upscale, to increase the
Okay,
value?
so I'm not saying that co-ops are never going to have an incentive to hire people. I'm saying that one, because the transaction cost involved in hiring and firing goes up, you're going to see less hiring and firing. And then two, that relative to traditional firms, the marginal worker will get hired at the traditional firm, but not at a co-op. Because when I say marginal worker, I mean like one additional worker, the like last additional worker would be like potentially like beneficial to hire. In a traditional firm, you just have to pay them a salary. In a worker co-op, you have to dilute the ownership shares of everyone at the co-op, as well as paying them a salary. But you can say the salary is like a claim on the profits of the company.
Right. So would you say that the reason that America has relatively low unemployment is just because firms are able to hire like workers that aren't inputting that much profit? Is that the only reason that we have that, or is that because we have so much production in America? So I don't know, where would that production go? It would just disappear?
No. But you just see lower hiring and firing. So I think a reason, like a non-insignificant reason that we have low-ish unemployment in America is because we have very loose labor market regulations. And it's just that there's not many transaction costs involved in hiring and firing workers. In like Germany, it costs like 30 months of employees' pay to fire someone. In America, it's like not even a year of an employee's pay to fire someone, right? So like on average, I mean, so that does lead to like more hiring in America. I think that is a non-insignificant reason why we have low unemployment compared to some European countries. But the unemployment rate just kind of reflects the like net amount of hiring and firing in any given period. It doesn't necessarily reflect like a bunch of the same people over time just sitting around doing nothing. You're always going to have people looking for jobs, and it's just going to take them longer to find them, and you're just going to have a less efficient economy overall, and the composition of industries might change.
Your argument to efficiency, you're saying that your traditional firm system is more efficient because it can hire workers that aren't really adding too much production to the company because it's a less. How could that ever be defined as efficient? Hiring workers that are not growing your company, that are not increasing profit.
Well, they are increasing your profits. I mean, technically you hire, until the marginal factor cost curve is equal to the marginal revenue curve. But regardless,
So you're hired. So your system is better because it inefficiently hires workers that aren't adding profit.
No, it's not inefficient. You're hiring laborers up until the point where they don't increase your total profits anymore. Which is it's going to be the case that they are diminishing marginal returns, and more workers are hired under a traditional firm system than are hired under the co-ops, because you're hiring workers that have diminishing returns. But it's better that the diminishing return workers be hired than not be hired. It's still efficient so long as it's
how is it efficient if it's still, like you just said, it's not adding, it's adding a negligible amount. How is that efficient?
It's still enough to increase your total profits.
Yeah, but not to the extent of hiring.
Yeah, but so there's diminishing returns to almost everything, right? So just because that I might have diminishing returns to like my own work, that like my first hour of streaming might get me more than like my second hour of streaming, right? People leave, whatever. That's the case with anything. It doesn't mean that the just because there are diminishing returns that it's not efficient to do the last thing where it's still profitable. It is still generally efficient to do the last hire the last marginal worker, work the last hour, do whatever the last thing you're doing is, because even if it's at that point negligible, because it still outweighs whatever cost you're comparing it to. In this case, the marginal factor cost curve, the cost to the company of hiring the workers.
I don't see how a worker-led company would not be better at finding that last marginal worker, or better at hiring to full capacity than a
Well, it wouldn't be rational
firm,
for them to hire. It wouldn't be rational for them to hire the last marginal worker because they have to dilute the ownership to do so.
Right, because then it would not result in an increase in profit. So that is an efficient form of hiring, because you're not hiring somebody that's going to decrease your amount of money. You're decreasing your profit. You're incentivized to not do that.
Only because the ownership is diluted. In doing so, would dilute it even more.
But you understand that the ownership, your share goes up with profit. No matter how much I get, that you can have a 10% and then down to 7%. But if that 10% is worth 100 and that 7% ends up being worth 110, it's still worth diluting because now you have a more valuable share. Despite having
there are
less.
cases where it's worth diluting if it increases your profit, but there are, at some point that turns negative though. I'm not saying that
the point that it turns negative.
I'm not saying
hiring.
No.
So
so when you say efficient, when you say efficient, to be clear, the co-op is rational for not hiring the marginal worker, right? It is rational for them to not hire the marginal worker because doing so would dilute.
For them to not hire a worker that would end up not increasing the value of each individual share. Yes, it would be rational to not hire.
It's rational for them to not hire the marginal worker when you have to dilute ownership share to do so. But it would be rational for a traditional firm to do so. So then the question is, what is like the socially optimum outcome there, right? I think the socially optimal outcome is, the marginal worker being hired when the sort of outside cost to society or the outside benefits to society, which we think is like represented in profits, right, is worth the cost to the individual firm of hiring him, right? So that's why the traditional firm achieves at least closer to the socially optimal outcome there, as opposed to the co-op, which wouldn't hire the marginal worker, and therefore there'd just be less work done. And
I think that would be socially optimal if the workers in the traditional firm were receiving the amount of profit and the amount of increased money that they would see in a co-op. But like you're saying, like your system is better because it can hire more people for more slave cut wages. Like I don't think that's the socially optimal. If we have everybody hired, but people do not have sufficient wages or are not being rewarded with the fruits of their labor, that is something that is unjust. That is an unjust system at the end of the day.
Okay, I do want to get, there's like a bunch of other people in here. You don't have to leave or anything, but I want to know what other people are here for. I'm just curious what.
We're just here to listen to Absorb Toast.
Oh, that's it.
Oh,
my lack.
Really?
Yeah. Also, just a note. Do you have a less sensitive microphone, perhaps?
Okay.
Oh, what's wrong with it?
There's just a lot of lip smacking. Like I can hear your tongue squelching.
I think my mouth is dry. Maybe I should drink more. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Well, all right. You're all good.
Yeah. Okay, that was a good debate. But you should go after National Socialists on their horrific beliefs, not their lame economic tariff dunks. That's doesn't do anything for anybody, bro. Get after them.
I don't know. I had fun, and I think their beliefs are wrong, and I think they were epically exposed for not knowing anything.
On tariffs, who cares? The viewer watching that, wow, this guy got dunked on because he didn't really know the tariff calculation formula. Wow. Not like if I was watching, I was like, whoa, this guy thinks we need to deport every African back to Africa. I'd be like, whoa, what's going on with this guy? But then he's like, wow, tariffs. Okay.
I don't know. His views are on that issue are out there as well. So I don't know.
Whose views are out there?
Dylan's and that other dude as well, Ribcast. I don't know if he's as big a Groyper dude, but I think he's broadly Christian nationalist.
Yeah, they're all Christian nationalists. Yeah, well, good debate. What's I gonna say? I think I think that our difference is you're way too I don't know. I think there needs to be some morality behind economic theory. Like even if I were to concede literally everything he said, that your system would be more efficient or whatever. I think that the moral weight of not paying workers, not giving them a say in their business, not mandating that is greatly outweighs any form of inefficiency, especially when we would end up in the end goal of a state-run economy. But
I mean, I just care about the sort of outcome to society overall, and I think that's enhanced by traditional firms. Worker co-ops are probably just going to make us all worse off in the long run, even if it gives some workers some individual workers benefits in terms of the say they have at a company.
Right, but you don't think there's some inherent flaw in our system that we literally operate our businesses like a monarchy, like a oligarchy? We've recognized in society that politically is wrong and that humans that are living somewhere deserve a say, and yet we spend half our lives at work and we don't apply the same thing. We say for a country I live in, I deserve a say because I'm contributing to the country. But then when it comes to workers, it's well, no, only this one major shareholder gets a say in literally anything, and if you don't like it, you can fuck off and leave.
No, I don't know. Sure. I don't know what it'd be like. I don't think is inherently wrong as long as there is some amount of competition between employers and workers have, above one option as for where to work and
had
such.
good competition between countries? We had every country was a dictatorship, but some dictatorships were better than others. Would that be like chill? Because then I could just leave mine and go to North Korea.
I think it's just a difference in like degrees. So like I don't think there's like to be clear, I don't think there's anything when I say intrinsically, I mean like intrinsically, fundamentally, like base level bedrock morality. Like I don't think there's anything intrinsically good about democracy either. I think democracy is good insofar as it has like good outcomes and ensures like people's interests are heard and such, and leads to good outcomes for society overall. If it was the case that world welfare was enhanced by having a bunch of dictators instead of democracies, then I would favor like the dictators. I just don't think that's the case, and I think it's unlikely to be the case for a bunch of different reasons that don't apply to firms competing for workers.
Yeah, I would say I don't think democracy is good just because of the outcomes it creates. I think democracy is good because it's the best. We have a finite amount of resources on the planet and a amount of people, and the best way to allocate that seems to be through democracy. The most fair way would be through a democratic system, some sort of democratic system, with obviously guide rails here and there. But I would say that's the most just, because no one man has more right or claim over anything than another. So.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be what I would say.
Wait, are you a streamer or anything? I don't know. It seems like you got some people in here. I don't know what that's about.
He has a famous YouTube account.
Okay, no, I don't. These are just friends of mine. But no, I'm not a streamer. No, I'm not a streamer. I just debate Marxists normally. But sometimes I'll debate liberals.
He's worked production on a couple shows.
Oh my God, shut up. Literally terrible. I worked for Fish Tank. You should watch Fish Tank. Fish Tank's a good show. I started out as a Destiny fan, so we share the DDG roots. Then I watched Cedar get crushed by I watched Crowder get crushed by Cedar, then I watched Cedar stuff, then Vosh, then Vosh sucks. But then started reading up on that.
Someone in chat says they want to know your objection to Marxism, but I think you just meant you debate Marxists on their exact interpretation of Marxism and such. Because I think you said
I debate like left comms and left comms and like Stalinist. I'm not a Stalinist. I'm a Trotskyist. So I debate all the other forms of communists that we have different interpretations of Marx. Vosh fan. I'm not a Vosh fan.
Keep later on my chat. Entertain my stream for like 30 seconds as I get a drink real quick. I'll be back.
Right. Okay. I'm on it. Vosh fan. Destiny fan. Destiny fan is true. How did Cedar do with all those buckets? I don't know what that means. Most fair way is to roll a d20. How really you get to keep all the resources? Gross. That is like literally ideological fascism. Yeah, we don't like Destiny around here. You'll fit in. Are you out of your mind? What do you mean you don't like Destiny around here? I took a look at the YouTube page. It's freaking Destiny rip. Straight up. The intro music, the thumbnails. It's W, but it's straight up. It's all Destiny stuff. I'm sure you guys have some disagreements with them, but like, it's all just live Destiny stuff.
My intro is a Destiny knockoff. That is true. I admit it.
Yeah, I recognize that music from all the way. Yeah. Destiny is a total criminal.
Shattered Remnants is re-putting all their stuff out on Spotify, or they already did. Does that interest anybody? I can talk about that.
You seem to be making more of a Ellerman's critique of capitalism than a Marxist one. How am I anti-orthodox Marxist? I'm the most orthodox Marxist
I think
there is. I'm the only
I think
true
the
Marxist.
distinction he's talking about, I could be wrong, is that when you're appealing to like something
Morality,
like morally wrong or whatever,
I know
most
that
of like
humanist,
Marx's work was like his work about exploitation and such is like it's not necessarily a moral critique. It's just like a kind of structural like descriptivist model about how workers surplus labor value is extracted. It seems like you're appealing to a broader like moral concern. that Marx didn't
Well,
really.
I mean, it depends. Like early Marx's writing, Marx was more human focused and but I know that towards the end of his life, he was anti-humanist and whatever was, just making critiques of structures, which I would agree. But I just think also the most convincing argument would be that of a moral human one. But also labor theory of value, yes, but yeah, I believe in labor theory of value.
Wow, cringe.
What? How's that cringe? Are you gonna do the dirt? What if we pay people to dig a hole or whatever?
No, I think there's like
I have to read.
Labor. I have to read more about it. So the issues I'm familiar with are, one, I think it is just possible to compute like profit rates and such without the need for labor values. It's like labor values seem to be redundant. As my understanding is that Straffa's analysis on that is widely accepted, and labor values are just not actually needed to compute things that Marx thought you needed them to compute. And then two, I think there's the transformation problem. I don't know if there's any particularly good response to that. It doesn't seem like you're able to coherently transform socially necessary labor time into prices.
Yeah, I'm not that too read on labor theory of value, but I mean, I don't know. I would say that these things like seem to be issues when we're talking about like having a market-based system still, and I think that the goal would be having not a market-based system. Would be having a state-run system at the end of the day. So I think that when you like having to place value on things, socially necessary things, I think if you have a truly democratic system, a truly representative government, you will.
Well, that was just Marx's term for the
necessary and what is not.
I'm gonna forget the exact definition, but the average amount of embodied labor in a given commodity or whatever was the socially necessary labor time.
Yeah. Wait, the analytical Marxist. What does this person say? Orthodox Marxists reject basing the critique of morality. I mean, my primary I don't know. I maybe more Orthodox Marxists do that, then I guess they're more Orthodox than me. But I would still. What do I think of Hassan? He's a tanky. He's a Stalinist revisionist. He doesn't follow anything that Marx wrote. He is an open Stalinist, though. Crazy. Yeah. So
Okay.
All right. Well, God bless.
Yeah, we can talk again if you want, but I appreciate it.
W Malfit though. Yeah, W Malfit. All right, yeah, appreciate it.
Any of they're just here to listen, I guess. Okay, there goes. Goddamn. Okay, we'll do this. Cereal flowers. Bro, it's a posse, apparently. Do you feel lonely now? No, I got chat. That's all I need. I don't know if China's gonna be on here, but I would ask China. Okay, number 8. Feel like we got enough subsidies. We probably make some cereal flowers. Yeah, number 3. Bet Spain's got some. Apparently not really. Germany. Okay, Germany's number 5. I'm gonna guess the United Kingdom. Sounds like some shit they would make. Not really, apparently. Mexico. Thailand. Damn. Ukraine. Oh, I should have guessed Ukraine. 15 billion, a bunch of coal, and some copper and gold. I really don't know who exports coal and other solid fuels, but I feel like probably some West African nation. But don't really know which. They don't really have oil though. I'm gonna guess the DRC. I don't know. I don't think it's a DRC. I think they would have other metals and such. Yeah. Okay. I don't know. Does Oman export some fucking I think Oman is like textiles and stuff. Not Romania. I think they also have oil. Armenia? I'm going purely based off the era at this point. Oh, fuck. Oh, you know what? I bet it's one of the fucking... I bet it's one of the stans. Turkmenistan, I don't know. Maybe not, because isn't Tajikistan the furthest east one? This is some bullshit. "2,000 kilometers east of Tajikistan, bro. There's definitely no way China. China is way more than 15 billion, and it's not in this. But I feel like it can't... The Philippines or some shit? It can't be Taiwan. Probably not the Philippines. They have other... I don't think they have this stuff. It can't be Japan. They would have tech and cars and stuff. Man, I don't fucking know. Laos? Maybe. That's like south of Tajikistan though. But maybe it's not south enough for it to say. Fuck it. I don't think it's right, but I'm gonna guess the Philippines. I don't know. Mongolia? Oh, that is a country that is that it makes sense that they would export a bunch of this stuff and is not in the Pacific Ocean and also is east of Tajikistan still. That does make sense. Damn. Fuck. Okay. So tomorrow, I'm going to be on a panel that I don't really know the topic for. But Reexamination invited me to it a while ago and said, be there. I'm not going to tell you the topic, but it's going to be big. You don't want to miss it. So I said yes. So, I don't know how long that'll be. Potentially afterwards, I'll be talking to one of the dudes I was talking to earlier today again, or a new dude who is also on TikTok. Do you wing it on these panels or ever do pre-research? It just depends. I mean, what do you mean these panels? Do you mean the panel that it's just that I don't know the topic for? Obviously that I can't do research for. But it just depends. A lot of times it's like I'll just get exact numbers for things that I probably already know. Like if it's a Gibbs panel on like 1 year of the Trump economy or whatever, right? Like it's, I just make sure to have the exact numbers for some things written down. But other times it's just I'll just do like some general reading into what I might think will come up that I don't feel the most confident about, even if it's a topic I've talked about 100 times before. Like, for example, on Saturday, I'll be talking to Ancom Ultra Runner, Caden, and although I've talked to a number of socialists, and I feel fairly confident. Okay, I don't think I'm going to get epically honed or anything. I'm probably going to do some reading about like labor theory of value stuff, just because it might come up, and debates motivate me to read more, so it's useful. But yeah, that'll be so tomorrow at the panel, don't know the topic. Afterwards, might talk to some more TikTok people, and then Saturday, talking to Caden and Com Ultra Runner, and between them, Thursday, Friday, might set up some can we talk to someone normal? Is anyone normal? Is anyone normal? Is anyone normal? Anyone normal? Yeah, I don't know. Can we get David Splinter on? Can we get David Splinter on? Yeah. That's what I got planned. I got work in the morning. So what are you thinking of Avi's argument for voting for Trump? Has it changed? As I understood it, it was like, you know, you should weight really heavily the like future potential of certain terrorist organizations, like given that the sort of return to terrorism is only going to go up over time because the advancements in technology, like you should really heavily weight getting rid of terrorism now, and Trump is going to be better for that. On top of that, I think he has like the pro-sentience concerns, and then I think there's one other thing he said, but I don't know what it was. I don't know. I just like don't think that Kamala Harris would be like sufficiently bad on the terrorism issue to really warrant any much consideration of it compared to all the other things. I think she's a lot worse on, or a lot better on. Trump's a lot worse on. And then the pro-sentient stuff, like I think it's just for one, I think Avi said his threshold was like 8 weeks, which just seems like questionable to me. I think probably 12 weeks is like the earliest it'd be kind of feasible to have some type of sentience. And I think the majority of abortions take place before, I don't know if the majority take place before 8 weeks, but I know the majority take place before like 12 weeks. So it's just like not a big enough thing to like weight incredibly heavily. I think that should be like non-zero for sure. But, you know, what happened with that emoji sauce drama? Harris wouldn't have went to war for Iran though. I mean, yeah, I think that's probably good. But like, I'm just saying, I don't think she's sufficiently like she would have kept giving Israel stuff, right? Like, you know, I think Trump was wrong when he said Israel wouldn't exist if Kamala Harris got elected. Okay, like I think she would be good enough such that like that is not a concern that I would weight very heavily. Yeah, but I'm sure I just place like less weight in it in any sense. Well, you're anti-Iran war. How would I like been for a while now? Okay. Head over to IRI. I think I can send you that on Twitch and YouTube, actually. Because I think he multi-streams. I can. Let's go. Oh, or not. Or Twitch hates me. Okay, I don't know what that's about. Regardless, head over to IRI on YouTube at least. I'll see you all tomorrow. I got that panel planned, and then maybe some stuff afterwards. But I got work in the morning, so I'm gonna head to. I might sneak in a game of Lucio Ball or two. I might play some Lucio Ball, but then I'm gonna head to bed. So love streaming. Love to go to stream. Like, subscribe, share. Thanks everyone for stopping by.